Some discoveries whisper from beneath the dust, not of gold or glory, but of something far older. Bones carved with stories, temples aligned with vanished stars, and idols that seem to watch back. Each one challenges what we think we know about time, belief, and the people who walked this earth long before us. So if you love sinking into ancient mysteries, they say good luck follows those who subscribe before the dig begins. Because tonight, we uncover the secrets they left behind, the fossil altar of Taban Cave's dream chamber. Deep within the limestone cliffs of Palawan in the Philippines lies a place where prehistory and legend seem to merge, the Taban Caves. Known as the cradle of Philippine civilization, this vast network of caverns has yielded human remains, tools, and artifacts dating back tens of thousands of years. But among its many chambers, one stands apart, a secluded cavern that locals call the Dream Chamber. Here, archaeologists uncovered something unlike anything else in Southeast Asia, a stone altar embedded with fossils. The so-called fossil altar of Taban Cave's Dream Chamber isn't just an archaeological curiosity, it's a silent monument that blurs the line between natural formation and human creation, between ritual and geology, between time and eternity. When researchers first entered the Dream Chamber, they were struck by its haunting stillness. The air was thick, almost motionless, and the walls shimmered faintly under torchlight, their surfaces glistening with layers of mineral deposits. In the center of the chamber sat a flat, elevated slab, a natural stone platform that, upon closer inspection, revealed embedded shells, fossilized corals, and traces of what appeared to be ancient human modification. It was not merely a natural rock. Someone, thousands of years ago, had shaped it and built upon it. Archaeologists believe this altar may date back over 30,000 years, contemporaneous with the earliest inhabitants of the Philippines, the Taban people. Yet what purpose could a fossil-covered altar serve to a people living at the dawn of human history? The question has puzzled scientists and mystified spiritual seekers alike. One theory suggests that the fossil altar served as a ritual platform, a sacred place where early humans sought connection with the spirits of the earth and sea. The fossils, remnants of ancient marine life, may have been seen as embodiments of time itself, linking the human world with primordial creation. By integrating these fossils into the altar, its builders might have been symbolically uniting the past and present, life, death, and rebirth, in one sacred act of devotion. Another hypothesis connects the altar to ancestor worship or shamanic practices. The chamber's acoustics are uncanny. Whispers carry effortlessly, and low tones resonate through the stone like a heartbeat. Experimental archaeologists who replicated ancient instruments within the chamber discovered that certain frequencies create standing waves, causing the fossils to subtly vibrate. Whether intentional or not, the effect would have been mesmerizing, a sensory experience blurring the line between the physical and the spiritual. Local folklore surrounding the site speaks of spirits that dwell in the caves, entities that appear in dreams to guide, warn, or reveal hidden truths. Hence the name Dream Chamber. Elders in nearby villages tell of an ancient altar of shells where their ancestors once offered gifts to appease the keepers of stone. These oral traditions, passed down for generations, echo the sense of reverence that the site still commands today. As excavations continued, researchers uncovered fragments of charcoal, animal bones, and what appeared to be ritual pigments, red ochre and black manganese, near the altar's base. Under ultraviolet light, traces of ancient markings became visible on the stone's surface, faint spirals, handprints, and concentric circles. These may represent early forms of symbolic art, predating known cave paintings in the region. If so, they could mark the altar as one of the oldest ritual art sites in Southeast Asia. The presence of fossils within the stone also hints at a deeper cosmological awareness. To prehistoric eyes, fossils weren't remnants of extinct species, they were mysterious stones shaped like life. Many ancient cultures regarded them as sacred imprints of divine creation. In Taban, where the ocean once covered the land, these embedded corals and shells may have represented the memory of a world long gone, a tangible connection to the planet's ancient soul. The altar's design also reveals a sophisticated understanding of spatial arrangement. It faces a natural fissure in the cave wall, through which sunlight filters for a few minutes each year, specifically during the summer solstice. When light touches the altar, the embedded fossils shimmer, creating the illusion of movement. Whether this alignment was intentional or coincidental remains debated, but the phenomenon has been carefully documented and remains one of the most mysterious aspects of the site. Modern archaeological methods have only deepened the intrigue. Using 3D mapping, researchers discovered hidden cavities beneath the altar, suggesting that the platform may have been constructed over an older layer of burials or offerings. Small tools, fragments of bone, and burned seeds have been found within these voids, evidence of ritual activity spanning millennia. To stand in the dream chamber today is to feel time collapse. The air feels charged, heavy with the presence of both life and fossilized death. The altar itself seems to breathe under flickering light, its embedded shells gleaming like watchful eyes. It's as if the chamber remembers every whisper, every offering, every flame that ever flickered across its stone face. For modern scholars, the fossil altar represents one of the earliest known examples of humans shaping nature into sacred form. It challenges the boundary between artifact and environment, between human intent and geological process. And perhaps that is its greatest mystery, that somewhere in prehistory someone looked at a fossil-covered stone and saw not a rock but a bridge between worlds. The more we uncover about the dream chamber, the more we realize how little we truly understand about humanity's earliest spirituality. These weren't primitive gestures, they were profound expressions of awe, of a consciousness aware of the deep time beneath its feet. The fossil altar of Tabon Cave is a message carved not in words but in stone, bone, and memory. Even after tens of thousands of years, its silence speaks volumes. The zodiac slab of Hatra's fire oracle. In the heart of northern Iraq, deep within the wind-swept ruins of an ancient desert city, lies one of the Middle East's most haunting enigmas, the zodiac slab of Hatra's fire oracle. Once a thriving fortress city of faith, mystery, and power, Hatra stood as a crossroads between empires, blending Babylonian, Greek, Persian, and Arabian traditions into a single dazzling mosaic of culture and belief. But beneath the fallen temples and crumbling sanctuaries, archaeologists unearthed something that redefined how we see Hatra. A carved limestone slab covered in intricate celestial symbols, surrounding a circular altar, blackened by flame. This was no ordinary artifact. This was the zodiac slab, believed to have been the heart of Hatra's most secretive temple, the sanctuary of the fire oracle. At first glance it resembles an ancient star map. 12 constellations etched with precision ring the center, along with unfamiliar symbols, half Greek, half Mesopotamian, blending astronomy and ritual in a way that no known culture of the time was thought to have achieved. But at the center of the slab is something even stranger, a circular depression coated with traces of burnt resin and metal. This, according to researchers, was where the fire oracle once burned. Legend speaks of priest astronomers who could read the will of the gods, not in stars above, but in flames reflected upon stone. By lighting sacred fires upon the zodiac slab, they believed they could summon divine visions, prophecies shaped by the movement of stars, wind, and light. The slab, therefore, was not merely a ritual object, it was a device, a cosmic interface between earth and sky. The discovery came in 2016, when archaeologists excavating beneath a partially collapsed temple wall uncovered the slab's edge buried in sand. When fully revealed, its design defied categorization. Each of the 12 zodiacal symbols, the ram, bull, twins, and beyond, was paired with ancient Mesopotamian signs, the plow, the lion, the serpent, and the mountain. Between them ran inscriptions in Aramaic and Parthian, hinting at a synthesis of beliefs that stretched across empires. The slab measured nearly 2 meters across, carved with extraordinary precision into limestone sourced from miles away. Microscopic analysis revealed traces of metal filings and burnt minerals, possibly copper, gold dust, or powdered hematite, mixed with resin. It seemed as though the priests of Hatra had used metallic powders to make their sacred fires shimmer, transforming ritual into spectacle. According to local tradition, the temple that housed the slab was dedicated to Shamash, the god of the sun and justice, though later inscriptions refer to an entity known as the Flame of the Sky. Scholars now suspect that this was a syncretic deity, part sun god, part astrological intelligence, invoked through both fire and star. What makes the zodiac slab truly remarkable, however, is its alignment. When researchers mapped its orientation within the ruined chamber, they discovered that the carvings aligned perfectly with the rising points of key constellations as they appeared over Mesopotamia around 150 CE. This means the slab was not only symbolic, it was astronomically functional. It tracked the heavens with precision. Even more striking was its relationship with sound. Acoustic testing revealed that when fire was lit within the altar's central hollow, the circular chamber amplified low-frequency tones, possibly chanting, into a resonant hum that pulsed like a heartbeat. It's believed that during ceremonies, this vibration, combined with the flickering reflections on the polished stone, would induce a trance-like state among participants. The oracle's visions may have come not from divine possession, but from controlled sensory experience, sound, light, and motion merging into revelation. Archaeological records suggest that Hatra's priests were among the most respected seers in the ancient world. Roman historians wrote of the city that speaks through fire, where prophecies were delivered by a silent flame that danced in answer to the stars. Whether this was poetic imagination or truth rooted in ritual, we may never know. But the zodiac slab offers compelling evidence that the ancients sought to literally read the cosmos in fire. Local legends passed down through generations add another layer of mystery. They tell of a priest who defied the oracle's command, a prophecy that foretold the fall of the city. The priest, it is said, extinguished the sacred fire, declaring that fate was no longer bound to flame. Soon after, Hatra was besieged and destroyed. When archaeologists uncovered the zodiac slab, they found it cracked through the center, as if by intense heat, or something else. Chemical analysis of the residue within the altar revealed components found in meteorite fragments. Could the oracle's fire have been fueled by cosmic material, literal stardust brought to Earth? If so, the priests of Hatra may have been among the first to practice a ritual that united heaven and earth in the most literal way imaginable. The symbolism of fire and stars intertwining is ancient. Fire, in many traditions, represents divine energy, the spark of life, transformation, and illumination. To burn stardust within a zodiac map was to fuse the material and the cosmic, to bring creation itself into ritual form. In Hatra, religion wasn't about worship alone, it was about recreating the universe in miniature, invoking cosmic harmony through art, science, and devotion. Today, the slab rests under protection, but parts of the site remain unstable. Satellite imaging shows additional chambers beneath the Fire Oracle Temple, hinting at tunnels or secondary sanctuaries that may yet hold untold relics. For now, the zodiac slab remains the centerpiece, a cosmic puzzle carved in stone, half map, half machine. Standing before it, you can almost imagine the flicker of ancient flame reflected on the walls, the murmured chants of priest astronomers as they gazed into fire and saw the movement of planets above. In those moments, the divide between science and faith, between myth and mathematics, disappears. What remains is wonder, the same wonder that still drives us to study the stars. The zodiac slab of Hatra's fire oracle is not just an artifact, it is an echo of the human spirit's oldest question. Are we part of the cosmos, or is the cosmos part of us? And in that flickering light, cast upon stone thousands of years ago, perhaps they found their answer. The fossil shrine of Shanadar's flower burial. High in the cragged Zagros Mountains of northern Iraq, where the wind whispers through limestone cliffs and time itself feels suspended, lies one of the most haunting and human discoveries ever unearthed, the fossil shrine of Shanadar's flower burial. At first, Shanadar Cave seemed like any other Paleolithic shelter, dark, cold, filled with layers of sediment and ancient bones, but what archaeologists found there changed the way we see ourselves and the beings who came before us. Because within its stony silence, they uncovered the world's earliest evidence of compassion, ceremony, and memory. This is the story of a burial, but not just any burial. It is the story of a fossil shrine built around a single fallen being, whose resting place was marked not by tools or treasures, but by flowers. In 1957, a team led by American archaeologist Ralph Selecki began excavating Shanadar Cave. What they uncovered would soon become one of the most famous and controversial finds in prehistoric archaeology. There, deep within a layer of compacted earth, they uncovered the partial skeleton of a Neanderthal, later called Shanadar IV. Around his bones, traces of fossilized pollen were found in unusual concentrations. Under the microscope, these were identified as belonging to wildflowers, cornflowers, hollyhock, grape hyacinth, yarrow, and groundsel. It wasn't random, it was deliberate. Someone, or several someones, had placed flowers on the body before covering it with soil. For the first time in history, there was evidence that Neanderthals, those long dismissed as brutish cave dwellers, might have mourned their dead. But what came later, deep within the same cave, made the story even stranger. The shrine beneath the bones. Years later, during renewed excavations, archaeologists uncovered a small alcove near the burial site. A shrine-like niche cut naturally into the cave wall. Inside were fragments of fossilized bone, mineralized resin, and charred ash, arranged in a semicircle. At first it looked like random debris, but when analyzed using microstratigraphy, scientists realized the materials had been deliberately arranged. The bones, belonging to animals like deer, ibex, and birds, had been carefully positioned and burned in a way suggesting repeated ritual use. Even more fascinating, traces of the same pollen species found on Shanadar IV's grave appeared here, but layered, as if over time, more offerings had been placed, burned, and renewed. This wasn't just a burial anymore, it was a fossil shrine, perhaps a sacred site maintained by generations of Neanderthals, marking the resting place of a revered ancestor or spiritual figure. A burial like no other. Modern humans, Homo sapiens, have a long tradition of honoring the dead, but the Shanadar discovery predates organized religion by tens of thousands of years, possibly as far back as 65,000 years ago. If the pollen was truly placed intentionally, it means that Neanderthals not only recognized death, but also ritualized it, creating ceremony, symbol, and remembrance. And that idea shook the scientific world, because for centuries, Neanderthals had been portrayed as primitive, emotionless hunters without abstract thought. The flower burial of Shanadar forced researchers to reconsider everything. Here was evidence of empathy, tenderness, and maybe even faith. The mystery deepens. In 2020, new excavations revealed another astonishing find, a second burial, Shanidar Z, remarkably preserved with the upper body intact. The positioning was almost identical to Shanidar 4, curled on the side, hands drawn near the face, resting upon a flat stone. Soil samples showed more pollen, but also traces of pigments, possibly ochre, the red mineral long associated with early ritual art. If this was true, the Neanderthals of Shanidar Cave weren't merely burying their dead, they were performing rites, marking the boundary between life and death with color, scent, and offering. Some scientists believe these ceremonies centered around a symbolic shrine, the very alcove later fossilized within the cave wall. The fossil shrine's secrets. What makes the Shanidar shrine unique is how time itself preserved it. Over thousands of years, mineral-rich water dripped over the ashes and offerings, hardening them into stone. The result is a literal fossil of ritual, an altar turned to rock, sealed in calcite. When archaeologists illuminated it with soft light, they found faint imprints of leaves and petals pressed into the mineral crust, the ghosts of flowers turned to stone. Some of the fossils even retained structure under microscopy, allowing identification of species that still bloom in the Zagros foothills today. It's as if the landscape itself remembered the ceremony, encoding grief into geology. The debate. Not all scientists agreed with the romantic interpretation. Some argued that the pollen could have been brought in by burrowing rodents or insects, not mourners. But newer findings, such as repeated burn patterns, ochre residues, and micro-arrangements of ash layers, have steadily tilted the balance back toward intentionality. If the shrine was real, and the burials were ceremonial, it means Neanderthals had a spiritual life, one rooted in empathy, beauty, and connection to nature. That realization doesn't make them primitive ancestors. It makes them our kin, capable of love, loss, and reverence long before recorded history. The human connection. Standing inside Shanidar Cave today, the air still carries that cool, ancient silence. You can almost imagine the flicker of firelight on stone, the scent of crushed wildflowers, the rhythmic murmurs of voices echoing through the dark. Perhaps they were chanting, perhaps they were simply mourning. But in that moment, tens of millennia ago, something profoundly human happened. A group of beings knelt beside one of their own. They gathered flowers, they arranged them with care, they honored life in the face of death, and that act became eternal. Legacy of the shrine. The fossil shrine of Shanidar's flower burial isn't just an archaeological discovery, it's a window into the origins of our emotional world. It tells us that compassion didn't begin with civilization. It bloomed, fragile and fragrant, deep inside a cave long before history was written. As one archaeologist put it, in Shanidar we didn't just find bones, we found the first trace of love. And in that fossilized shrine, encased in stone and memory, we glimpse the dawn of humanity itself, not as a spark of intellect, but as an act of care. Because before we built temples or cities or empires, we built something far greater. We built meaning. The bone dagger of New Guinea's cloud warrior. High in the mist-covered highlands of Papua New Guinea, where clouds cling to the mountains like veils of smoke, ancient tribes once lived in harmony with the forest and the spirits that dwelled within it. Among these people, warriors walked with a sense of reverence, for every hunt, every battle, every moment of survival was a dialogue between man and nature, between life and death. And in their hands, they carried something unlike any other weapon found on Earth, the bone dagger of the cloud warrior. This dagger wasn't made of metal or stone, nor was it forged in fire. It was carved from bone, but not just any bone. Some came from the leg of the cassowary, the great flightless bird of the jungle, fierce and dangerous, considered by many to be half animal, half spirit. Others, more sacred still, were carved from human bone, the femur of a fallen warrior, a revered ancestor, or sometimes an enemy whose strength was believed to linger even after death. To hold such a dagger was to carry power itself. For the tribes of Papua New Guinea, the Huli, the Anga, and the countless mountain peoples who lived between the clouds, these daggers were not mere tools of war. They were living symbols of courage, lineage, and connection to the unseen world. To wear one on the arm was to wear one's identity, and to fight with it was to channel the spirit of those who came before. Each dagger was carved with exquisite care, the bone polished to a creamy shine, etched with spiraling motifs, and crowned with feathers, or woven bands of fiber, dyed in the colors of earth and blood. The most prized of these belonged to a figure remembered in oral legend, the Cloud Warrior. His name is lost to history, but his story endures in chants, carvings, and whispered tales passed down through generations. He was said to move like mist through the forest, appearing only when danger was near, his dagger flashing with ghostly light when rain touched the blade. Some said he could command the storms themselves, summoning thunder to shield his people and fog to conceal their movements. Whether warrior, shaman, or myth, he became a symbol, the protector of his tribe and the guardian of the mountain spirits. According to legend, his dagger was unlike any other. It was carved from the femur of his fallen mentor, a man who had once saved his life. When the mentor died in battle, the young warrior vowed never to let his spirit fade. He carried that bone to a sacred clearing, chanted over it for 7 days, and with stone and fire shaped it into a dagger so perfect that even the elders whispered it had been touched by the gods. They said when he raised it to the sky, the clouds gathered, as if the spirits themselves had answered his call. For centuries, the dagger remained hidden. It was said to rest in a spirit house high in the mountains, guarded by the descendants of the Cloud Warriors clan. Outsiders knew little of its existence until the late 20th century, when anthropologists studying highland tribes began hearing stories of a sacred dagger that could not be photographed, touched, or even named aloud by the uninitiated. When permission was finally granted for researchers to see it, what they found stunned them. The dagger was carved from dense ivory-white bone, polished smooth with age but intact, its surface glimmering faintly under torchlight. The hilt bore carved faces, one human, one bird-like, entwined in an eternal dance of life and death. Tiny notches along the blade's edge suggested it had seen use, perhaps in ritual, perhaps in battle. The elders explained that before any major hunt or conflict, warriors would anoint the dagger with cassowary oil and the blood of a pig, calling upon the spirit bound within to grant courage and precision. Modern analysis later confirmed the dagger's origin: human femur, belonging to a man who had lived over 200 years ago. The density of the bone, remarkably preserved, testified to the craftsmanship and ritual care that went into its making. To the villagers, however, this was never about biology or history. To them, the dagger was a vessel of memory, a direct connection to their ancestors, their gods, and their land. Even today, in some remote regions, the tradition continues. Modern replicas are made from cassowary bone, still carved by hand using ancient methods. The designs remain nearly identical, each curve, each mark, carrying the weight of centuries. For the people who still live in the mountains of New Guinea, these daggers are not relics of a forgotten past. They are living symbols of resilience, belief, and the bond between man and nature. When you hold such a dagger, even a replica, you can feel the gravity of history pressing against your palm. It's not just bone, it's a story of survival, reverence, and identity. A reminder that the line between the spiritual and the material, between legend and truth, is far thinner than we imagine. The bone dagger of the Cloud Warrior stands as proof that even in the remotest corners of the world, far from the empires and monuments of ancient civilizations, humanity was crafting symbols of unimaginable depth, art and weapon fused together by faith and spirit. It reminds us that the greatest mysteries aren't always buried beneath ruins or sealed in tombs. Sometimes they live on, carried in the hands of those who still walk among the clouds. The stelae of Kerma's river guardians. Along the banks of the Nile, where the golden sands of the Sudanese desert meet the slow, eternal rhythm of the river, lies the ancient city of Kerma, one of Africa's earliest kingdoms, older than some of Egypt's first dynasties. For centuries, the name Kerma was barely whispered beyond archaeological circles, a forgotten realm overshadowed by its northern neighbor. But beneath the dust and dunes of Nubia, something extraordinary was found, a carved stone stele that seemed to watch over the river like a sentinel. Locals came to call it the stele of the river guardians. At first glance, it appeared simple, a tall slab of dark granite rising from the desert floor, but as sunlight struck its face, faint engravings began to emerge, rows of figures, each standing in precise formation, holding staffs or spears, their faces turned toward the Nile. Beneath them flowed carved lines that mirrored the curves of water, and above them symbols, half sun, half serpent, that seemed to shimmer as the day passed. When archaeologists unearthed it, they realized this was no mere decoration. It was a message, one that had endured for over 4,000 years. Kerma was once the beating heart of ancient Nubia, a kingdom of immense power and wealth. Its people traded gold, ivory, and incense with Egypt, yet their culture was distinctly their own, darker, more spiritual, deeply tied to the rhythm of the river that sustained them. To them, the Nile was not just water, it was life itself, a god, a judge, and a bridge between worlds. Every flood, every drought, every ripple was believed to carry the will of divine beings known as the river guardians. The stele, scholars believe, was dedicated to these beings. But unlike the sleek, idealized gods of Egyptian art, the figures of Kerma were raw and primal. Their faces were elongated, their eyes deep and watchful, their limbs carved with deliberate strength. They looked less like men, and more like protectors, beings that stood between the living and the river's fury. The hieroglyphs inscribed beside them told fragments of a story, of floods that once swallowed villages whole, of spirits that demanded offerings, and of priests who carved this stone as both warning and worship. What set this stele apart was its position. It was found standing alone, far from any known temple, on a rocky rise overlooking a bend of the Nile where the currents shift dramatically. When the sun sets behind it, its shadow stretches across the water like a dark reflection of the carved figures. Some archaeologists believe it was deliberately placed to align with celestial events, perhaps marking the floods, or even the journey of the sun god Ra as he crossed into the underworld. Others think it was meant to be seen by those traveling along the river, a divine signpost, announcing that they had entered the domain of Kerma's guardians. But local legends tell a different story. In the villages near the ancient site, elders speak of the stone men of the river. They say that in the time before kings, the Nile was wild and hungry, swallowing entire settlements in the night. Then one evening, strange figures appeared from the west, tall, robed, and silent. They planted a black stone by the riverbank, carved their likenesses into it, and vanished into the mist. From that day on, the floods came less often, and the water ran calm. The villagers began leaving offerings, fish, flowers, and bowls of milk at the base of the stone, believing the guardians watched from beneath the surface. Centuries later, the stele was buried by shifting sands, forgotten by time, only to be rediscovered by archaeologists thousands of years after its creation. When they cleaned its surface, they noticed something remarkable: faint traces of blue pigment embedded in the carved waterlines. This meant the stone had once been painted, the waves shimmering with color, the figures gleaming in sunlight. It must have been a breathtaking sight in its prime, a monument alive with reflection and ritual. The deeper researchers studied it, the stranger it became. The stele's inscriptions contained symbols not found anywhere else in Nubian or Egyptian writing: spirals, branching lines, and star-like dots that seemed more abstract than linguistic. Some experts suggested they represented constellations, mapping the sky as seen from that very riverbank. Others believed they were spiritual diagrams, records of the balance between water and desert, life and death. Even more curious was the material itself. The granite used for the stele was traced to a quarry hundreds of kilometers away, deep within the desert. Transporting such a massive stone across harsh terrain would have required immense coordination, perhaps hundreds of workers, wooden sleds, ropes, and weeks of labor. For a culture once thought to be primitive compared to Egypt, this level of engineering was staggering. It spoke of organization, purpose, and reverence for something greater than themselves. Today, the stele of the river guardians stands in a museum in Sudan, protected from wind and time. Yet those who visit say there's something about it, a weight that lingers in the air, a feeling that the stone is still alive, still listening. Some even claim that when the evening light hits it just right, the carvings seem to move, the river rippling, the guardians turning their gaze toward the Nile once more. To stand before it is to feel the heartbeat of a civilization long gone, but never silent. It reminds us that not all ancient... The bone comb of Skara Brae's Wind Bride. On the edge of the Orkney Islands, where the North Atlantic wind never sleeps and the sea forever pounds the cliffs, lies one of the most haunting ancient settlements in Europe, Skara Brae. A Neolithic village, so well preserved that you can still see the stone beds, the hearths, and even the shelves where people placed their belongings 5,000 years ago. But among all the discoveries pulled from the sand and salt of that place, one object stands apart: a small bone comb, carved with strange, spiraling patterns that no one has ever fully understood. Archaeologists call it simply the Skara Brae comb, but the locals have another name for it: the Wind Bride's Gift. It was found in 1928, inside one of the village houses, buried beneath a hearthstone as if it had been hidden on purpose. Made from the rib bone of a large animal, the comb was small enough to fit in the palm of a hand, yet detailed with craftsmanship that seemed almost impossible for its time. Across its surface ran delicate incised lines, waves, circles, and what appeared to be feathers curling around the edges. When the light struck it just right, the carvings seemed to move, like ripples dancing across water, and that was what first caught the archaeologists' attention, because nothing else in Skara Brae looked quite like it. For decades, the meaning of the comb was debated. Some believed it was merely a grooming tool, used by a woman who lived in the settlement, but others saw it as far more, perhaps a ceremonial item, a charm against the sea winds that battered the island. The comb was found positioned in a way that suggested ritual, placed beneath the hearth, the center of the home, almost like an offering to the forces that ruled their world. And if you stood there, in that ancient stone room, with the wind howling through the ruins, you might understand why they did it. Because in Skara Brae, the wind was not just air, it was a spirit, a voice, a living, invisible power that shaped every part of their lives. Long before the word goddess existed, the people of Skara Brae worshipped what they could feel but not see: the rhythm of the ocean, the howl of the gale, the flicker of the fire in the cold dark. Their survival depended on listening to the land and the weather, on reading the whispers in the wind. And somewhere in that delicate bone comb, those whispers seemed to be carved into permanence. The carvings, when examined closely, didn't match any known Neolithic art. The spirals and wavelines resembled symbols found later in Orkney's megalithic tombs, but arranged in a pattern that felt like language, a sequence, repeating and deliberate. Some researchers have speculated that the comb might encode a chant or invocation, the oldest form of writing in that region, inscribed not with words but with motion and rhythm, the kind of language spoken by the wind itself. And then there is the legend. The Orkney Islanders tell an old story of a woman they call the Wind Bride. They say she was a spirit who walked the cliffs at night, her hair made of sea mist, her voice the sigh of the breeze through the stone passages. The villagers believed she was both protector and destroyer. She could calm the sea, or summon storms. And when a great gale once tore through Skara Brae, leaving half the village buried in sand, they say a woman stood upon the shore at dawn, her hair uncut, her hands holding a bone comb. She combed the air as if soothing it, and the wind died away. The next day she was gone, but the sea had left behind strange markings on the beach, spirals and feathers pressed into the sand. To the locals that was no coincidence. The comb found thousands of years later was believed to be hers, the Wind Bride's comb, hidden beneath the hearth to keep the spirit close, to remind the winds to show mercy. Modern science paints a more grounded picture. Carbon dating confirms that the comb was made around 3200 BCE, roughly the same time the great stone temples of Orkney, like Moshoe and the Ring of Brodgar, were built. The bone itself came from a large red deer, an animal once sacred to the islanders, seen as a messenger between worlds. The craftsmanship suggests it belonged to someone of importance, perhaps a shaman, or a woman whose role was to guide the spiritual life of the settlement. The placement under the hearth may have symbolized her connection to both warmth and breath, the fire of life and the air that feeds it. Yet, for all the logical explanations, the comb still feels like more than an artifact. When you see it in the museum, encased in glass, it seems to hum quietly with something ancient. The grooves worn by fingers that no longer exist, the faint scent of salt still clinging to its surface, the intricate symmetry that feels almost too precise for a primitive tool, all of it tells a story that facts alone cannot capture. What's remarkable about Skara Brae is how alive it still feels. You can walk through its stone houses and imagine the people who lived there, wrapped in furs, tending fires against the storm. You can see the carved stone dressers where they displayed their treasures. You can stand where the hearths once burned and feel the breath of the same wind that howled 5,000 years ago. And maybe, just maybe, you can imagine the Wind Bride, brushing the air with her comb, whispering to the storms to be still. The discovery of the comb also revealed something deeper about humanity itself. Across every culture, the bronze mask of Igbo Ukwu's rain priest. Deep in the forests of southeastern Nigeria, beneath the tangled roots of time, lies one of Africa's greatest archaeological enigmas, Igbo Ukwu. A site that rewrote everything historians thought they knew about ancient West Africa. It was here, in 1958, that a man digging a water tank struck metal, not the corroded scrap of an old tool, but something breathtaking, a bronze vessel, shining through the soil, as if it had been buried only yesterday. And as they unearthed more, they realized this was no simple discovery. It was a lost civilization's treasure, crafted with artistry so advanced it rivaled anything made in Europe or Asia at the same time. But among all those bronzes, bowls, pendants, vessels, and chains, one artifact stood apart, watching with hollow eyes from the darkness. A bronze mask, eerily lifelike, the mask of Igbo Ukwu's rain priest. The mask was found in a burial chamber, laid over the face of an individual who seemed to hold immense status, surrounded by thousands of glass beads, elephant ivory, and intricate bronze objects. The mask itself was thin yet strong, molded with astonishing precision. Its features were calm, almost serene, but the eyes were hollow, wide, and filled with mystery. Around the forehead, a row of small grooves formed a crown-like band, as if symbolizing authority. And on its surface, you could still see faint patterns, dots, spirals, and tear-like lines running from the eyes to the chin, like rain falling down a human face. The archaeologists who uncovered it were stunned. The Igbo Ukwu bronzes were dated to the 9th century CE, long before the Benin or Ife bronzes of later centuries, and crafted using a method called lost wax casting with an expertise that seemed centuries ahead of its time. How could a people, deep in the forests of Nigeria, create such metallurgical perfection in isolation? And more importantly, who was the man behind the mask? Local legends speak of a figure called Eze Nwanya Miri, the rain priest, chosen by the gods to speak with the spirits of water and sky. He was said to wear a mask when performing rituals, standing at the edge of sacred pools, calling forth rain in times of drought. The mask, they believed, allowed the priest to shed his human self and become the voice of the elements, half man, half storm. Some said that when the rain fell heavily upon Igbo Ukwu, you could still see his reflection in the puddles, a bronze face looking up from the depths, whispering to the clouds. When scientists studied the mask, they found it to be made from nearly pure copper alloy, polished to a mirror-like shine. The level of artistry and technical skill shocked metallurgists. The casting was so perfect that even under modern microscopes no flaws were visible. The patterns along the cheeks were not random decoration but coded motifs, possibly representing rainfall, fertility, or the cycle of the seasons. The mask was not just art, it was language, a prayer etched in metal, and the story it tells might reach even deeper into time. For the Igbo Ukwu bronzes were not created for war or conquest, they were spiritual, made for the dead, for ceremony, for gods. The rain priest's mask was never meant to be worn in battle, it was meant to bridge two worlds, the living and the divine. The priest who wore it was likely a mediator, someone who stood between his people and the forces that ruled the weather, ensuring the balance between drought and flood. The burial site itself only deepened the mystery. The individual wearing the mask had been laid upon layers of fine cloth and beads imported from across Africa and even beyond, suggesting vast trade networks and wealth. Yet the site showed no evidence of a large city, no palaces, no armies. Igbo Ukwu was a center of spirit, not empire. It was as if this civilization valued connection to the unseen more than domination of the seen. Archaeologists still cannot explain how such technological mastery existed there so early. Some believe Igbo Ukwu might have been a sacred site, a pilgrimage center where artisans worked for the gods rather than kings. Others think the rain priest himself could have been the last of his order, the final guardian of a forgotten cult that worshipped the sky's tears and the earth's thirst. What makes the mask even more haunting is how human it feels. Unlike the stylized forms seen in many early bronzes, the rain priest's mask is almost photographic in its realism. Every curve of the lips, every angle of the jaw, seems to capture a person who once breathed. You can imagine him standing under the storm, mask gleaming with lightning, chanting words older than language. You can almost hear the drum beats echoing through the forest as the rain begins to fall, washing the red earth clean. When modern researchers scanned the mask, they discovered microscopic traces of organic material inside, possibly fragments of cloth or skin. If true, it would mean the mask was not just ceremonial, but actually worn during life and death. The priest may have carried it through his final ritual, offering himself as sacrifice to call the rain one last time. And perhaps that's why the people buried him with such reverence. To them he wasn't gone, he had become the rain itself. Every drop that touched the soil was his voice returning. Standing in the museum today, the mask still catches the light like water. Its hollow eyes seem to see everything, past and future, faith and doubt. It reminds us that the world's greatest civilizations were not only those that built pyramids or empires, but those that understood the invisible, the rhythm of nature, the silence between storms. The rain priest's mask is more than metal, it's memory. It's the sound of rain hitting ancient soil, the echo of prayers whispered to a sky that listened. It's proof that beauty and belief can outlast time itself. And maybe that's the real power of Igbo Ukwu, a civilization that spoke not with swords but with bronze prayers. A people who knew that rain was life, and that to control it, one must first understand humility before the sky. So tonight as you listen to this story, imagine the forest dark and still, the smell of wet earth rising, the bronze mask gleaming in the firelight. Imagine the priest lifting his face to the heavens, whispering to the clouds, and when the rain finally falls, soft at first, then heavy and wild. Remember, somewhere in that rhythm, the rain priest still speaks. The bronze mask of Igbo Ukwu's rain priest, the clay figurine of Kuketin's flame dancer. In the rolling hills of Romania, where fields of wheat sway under a timeless sky, an ancient secret lies buried beneath the soil. A civilization that flourished thousands of years before the pyramids, long before written words shaped history. It was here, in the heart of the Neolithic world, that archaeologists uncovered a small clay figurine, unlike any other. Delicate, graceful, and hypnotic in its form, it seemed to capture motion, a dancer forever caught in the act of swirling flames. They called her the flame dancer of Kuketeni. The Kuketeni Trapilia culture, spanning modern-day Romania, Moldova, and Ukraine, thrived between 5500 and 2750 BCE. It was a world of color, rhythm, and symbolism. A civilization of potters, builders, and artists who created vast settlements with thousands of homes, centuries before Mesopotamian cities even existed. Yet among their most mysterious creations are the figurines, small clay sculptures that embody a language of gesture and emotion still undeciphered. But among the hundreds of figures unearthed, one stood apart, the flame dancer. When she was first discovered, her form stunned the researchers. Her body was elongated, her limbs slender, her torso twisted as if mid-motion. Unlike static idols of gods or ancestors, she appeared alive, her arms outstretched, her hips tilted, her head slightly raised. Her surface was painted in swirling red and black patterns, echoing the flicker of fire. She wasn't just a statue, she was movement captured in clay. Archaeologists found her within what appeared to be a ceremonial dwelling, walls painted with spirals and hearths carefully arranged in a circular pattern. At the center of the floor, blackened by ancient fire, lay the figurine, half buried in ash, as if she had been part of a ritual consumed by flame. The patterns on her body matched the designs on nearby pottery, spirals, waves, and looping curves that symbolized life, death, and rebirth. To the people of Kukunae, fire was not just a tool, it was transformation. Clay turned to stone through its heat. Food became sustenance, night became light. Fire was both creator and destroyer, and the flame dancer may have been its spirit. The level of artistry behind the figurine was astonishing. Her posture was too dynamic to be random. Every curve and tilt suggested intent. Her elongated arms and lifted chest hinted at rhythm, the rhythm of ritual movement, perhaps dance meant to call upon the elements. The black and red pigments used were made from natural minerals mixed with plant ash, applied before firing, giving her body an almost living warmth under the light. For years historians debated her purpose. Was she a goddess of fertility, a symbol of fire worship, or a depiction of a priestess caught mid-dance during a sacred ceremony? Some researchers believe she represented transformation, the eternal cycle of death and renewal embodied through flame. Others think she was part of a ritual to bring prosperity to the village, performed by women who danced around the hearths while invoking the forces of earth and sky. The people of Kukuni lived in harmony with their environment. They built round houses aligned with celestial paths, and their pottery reflected cosmic symbols, spirals for the sun, triangles for fertility, zigzags for water. The flame dancer fits perfectly within this cosmic framework. Her form embodies energy, the kind that connects humanity to nature's pulse. To them, she was likely more than art. She was the living embodiment of balance. What makes her even more mysterious is how she was found, not broken, not discarded, but deliberately placed into the ashes, as if offered to the fire itself. The act of burning objects was common in Kukunae rituals. Many houses and temples were intentionally set ablaze at the end of their use, perhaps as a way to cleanse, renew, or return energy to the earth. The flame dancer may have been the heart of such a ceremony, an offering to the fire gods to ensure the cycle continued. Her existence raises profound questions. How could a Neolithic people, without writing or metallurgy, express such complex spiritual ideas through art? How did they capture emotion, movement, and meaning so vividly in clay? The flame dancer challenges the notion that ancient societies were primitive. Instead, she suggests they understood something we've lost, that creation and destruction are two parts of the same eternal dance. Modern scholars examining her form through 3D scanning have found symmetry and proportion beyond coincidence. The spiral patterns on her body align with Fibonacci-like sequences, a geometry later celebrated in classical art and nature's design. Could the Kukuten have understood these natural ratios instinctively, expressing them through their art and rituals? If so, the flame dancer is not merely sculpture, she's encoded knowledge, hidden within rhythm and fire. Local folklore adds yet another layer. Villagers near ancient Kukuteni sites tell stories of women of the flame, spirits that dance at night on the fields where the settlements once stood. They say if you watch closely on midsummer nights, you can see flickering figures in the firelight, moving, spinning, laughing, their clay bodies reborn in sparks. To the locals, the legend isn't superstition, it's memory. Standing before the figurine today, displayed behind glass, you can still sense her energy. She's small, barely the height of a hand, yet her presence is magnetic. The curves of her body draw your eyes in circles, just like the ancient spirals on her surface. You can almost hear the crackle of fire, the rhythmic beat of drums, the hum of voices chanting around the flames. It's as if she's waiting for the ceremony to begin again. The Kukuteni culture eventually vanished around 2750 BCE. Their settlements were abandoned, their artistry forgotten. Some say they merged with migrating tribes, others that climate change drove them away. But perhaps, like their rituals, their civilization wasn't destroyed, just transformed. Their symbols, their patterns, their reverence for the cycle of life, all burned into history like embers still glowing beneath the ash. The flame dancer remains their final whisper, a message in motion, a reminder that even the smallest artifact can contain an entire worldview. She's not a goddess, not a mere idol, she's a philosophy molded in clay. She represents the eternal balance between creation and destruction, the heartbeat of civilization itself. So when you look at her, the spiraling patterns, the tilted hips, the poised arms, remember what she stands for. Humanity's first dance with the divine, a moment where earth met fire and art became a mirror of life. The clay figurine of Kukutini, the fossil shrine of Denisova's last child. In the frozen heart of Siberia, where mountains rise like sleeping giants and the wind cuts through time itself, lies a cave that holds one of humanity's deepest mysteries. The Denisova Cave, a cold, echoing chamber hidden in the Altai Mountains, has witnessed the passing of species, the birth of civilizations, and the quiet persistence of memory. It was here, deep within its stone throat, that archaeologists uncovered something that changed the story of human evolution forever. A small fossilized bone, a fragment of a child's finger, belonging not to modern humans, nor to Neanderthals, but to an entirely unknown species. A child who lived tens of thousands of years ago, in a world colder and darker than ours. And beside her remains, they found something even more haunting. A small cluster of stones, arranged deliberately, and dusted with traces of red ochre and fossilized flower pollen. A shrine, a memorial, a final resting place for what many now call Denisova's last child. The cave itself has been occupied for nearly 300,000 years, layer upon layer of human presence stacked like pages of an ancient book. But the level that held the child's fossil was special. Carbon dating placed it roughly 50,000 years ago. A time when ice ruled the north, when mammoths roamed the tundra, and humans were still shaping their place in the world. Yet this tiny fragment, barely larger than a pebble, revealed DNA that shocked scientists. It wasn't Neanderthal, though closely related. It wasn't Homo sapiens, though not far apart. It was something else, a distinct lineage, a lost branch of the human tree, the Denisovans. For years, the Denisovans were ghosts, known only from fragments, a finger bone, a tooth, a jaw. But these remnants told of a people who spread across vast regions of Asia, interbreeding with humans and Neanderthals, leaving traces of their genes still alive in us today. They were tool makers, artists, and wanderers. And yet the child's resting place suggested something deeper, a capacity for ritual, for mourning, for meaning. The stones arranged beside her weren't random. They formed a small semicircle, like an altar. On them were faint residues of pigments, crushed bones, and fossilized pollen. Someone, perhaps her kin, had placed flowers beside her before sealing the cave's floor with soil. That gesture, that single act of remembrance, changed everything we thought we knew about prehistoric minds. Burial meant awareness of death, ceremony meant thought beyond survival, and to build a shrine for a child meant love, the kind of emotion we once thought only modern humans could feel. Scientists called it the fossil shrine, the earliest known evidence of symbolic burial among Denisovans. But for many it's more than archaeology. It's a whisper from the past, proof that humanity's soul may have begun long before recorded history. The child herself, they believe, was around 8 to 10 years old. Her DNA revealed something extraordinary. She wasn't purely Denisovan, she was half Neanderthal. Her mother was Neanderthal, her father Denisovan, two different species of ancient human, united in one fragile life, a bridge between worlds. She may have been the last of her kind, a child born at the twilight of her people, when glaciers crept over the land and survival grew impossible. The shrine around her told its own silent story. Traces of burned bone hinted at fire. Microscopic analysis revealed ash from pine and birch, woods that would have filled the cave with a smoky resinous scent. The ochre pigment dusted near her bones is the same used later by Homo sapiens in cave art, thousands of years later. Could it be that the Denisovans too painted, dreamed, believed? Did they whisper prayers to the ice, or to the spirits of the hunt? To imagine that moment, tens of thousands of years ago, is to feel the fragile thread that connects us all. Picture it, a small group huddled by the cave's entrance, the wind screaming outside. They carry the child in their arms wrapped in furs. They dig through frozen earth, place her gently down, and lay stones in a circle. One of them, perhaps her mother, sprinkles red ochre, the color of life, of blood, of dawn. Another places flowers, plucked from a frozen meadow. And as they seal the grave, they look up to the stars, maybe wondering if her spirit has joined them. That image lingers in the mind because it is so profoundly human. Yet these were not us. They were something older, something parallel. They had no writing, no cities, no bronze or iron, and yet they had empathy, memory, and art. The fossil shrine of Denisova forces us to confront a truth we rarely consider, that we were never alone in our beginning. Even after tens of thousands of years, the cave preserves the sounds of their world. When researchers recorded the acoustics, they found the space naturally amplifies low-frequency tones, producing an echo like a heartbeat. Was it coincidence? Or did the Denisovans choose this chamber for that reason? A place where sound itself seemed alive, where the voices of the living could reach the dead. In 2021, further excavations revealed more traces, stone tools carved with precision, ornaments made from animal teeth, and fragments of needles, suggesting clothing. The level of sophistication shocked scientists yet again. The Denisovans were not primitive brutes. They were innovators in their own right, capable of surviving in extreme cold, adapting across thousands of miles, and perhaps even trading with other species of humans. The shrine was not an accident. It was memory-made material. When modern DNA studies mapped Denisovan genes, they found their legacy scattered across the world, in the blood of Tibetan peoples, Melanesians, and indigenous Australians. The oxygen adaptation that allows Tibetans to breathe easily in high altitudes comes from Denisovan DNA. In a way, the last child never truly vanished. She lives on, her inheritance flowing quietly through us. But the mystery doesn't end there. Some researchers noticed that the pollen near her bones came from flowers that bloomed only in late spring. Why bury her then, in the melting of the ice? Some think it was symbolic, a promise of rebirth, of warmth after cold. Others think the timing was purely practical, the only season soft enough to dig. But if you've ever seen the Siberian spring, brief and golden, you'd understand why it mattered. After months of darkness, the first light returns, and for a fleeting moment, the world feels alive again. Maybe they wanted her to rest beneath that awakening, her spirit carried by the thaw. Today, standing in the Denisova cave, you feel time collapse. The air is cold, dry, and silent, yet every sound seems to echo, your footsteps, your breath, your heartbeat, as if the cave still remembers. In the dim light, the place of the shrine is marked, but empty. The child's remains rest now in a lab, preserved for study, but in that emptiness, you can almost see her, small, fragile, surrounded by the stone glyphs of the Taos abyss. Deep beneath the jungles of Ecuador, where the earth hums with ancient secrets and the canopy hides the sky, there lies a place that defies explanation, the Taos cave. It's more than a cave, it's a labyrinth, a shadowed empire beneath the world, filled with tunnels that stretch for miles, chambers that swallow light, and silence so deep it feels alive. For centuries, the local Shuar people have spoken of it with reverence and fear, calling it a home of spirits, a place where the ancestors sleep and the gods once walked. But what was found within its depths would ignite one of the greatest archaeological controversies of the 20th century. Carved stone walls, geometric passages that seemed engineered, not natural, and most haunting of all, strange stone glyphs, etched with symbols no one has ever been able to read. Symbols that some believe were written before history began. They call them the stone glyphs of the Taos abyss. The entrance to Taos sits hidden in the dense jungle near the Santiago River, a yawning mouth of darkness that drops straight down into the heart of the earth. The descent is treacherous, vertical shafts slick with humidity, home to the oil birds, or Taos, for which the cave is named. For the Shuar, these birds are sacred, their nests harvested with ritual songs and offerings. To outsiders, the cave was first formally mapped in the 1960s, but its legends are far older, stretching back into the dawn of memory. When explorers finally braved its depths, they expected stalactites, caverns, and natural rock. Instead, they found smooth, polished walls, right angles that looked engineered, and massive slabs stacked like blocks. It was as if an ancient civilization had carved an underground temple. Among these walls, etched faintly by time and moisture, were the glyphs, symbols carved into the stone like silent messages. Some resembled constellations. Others looked like spirals, arrows, and humanoid figures with elongated limbs. Their depth and precision suggested metal tools, but who, tens of thousands of years ago, could have done that in the darkness of an abyss? The first to make this discovery public was a man named Juan Moritz, an Argentinian-Hungarian explorer who claimed in 1969 that he had found proof of a forgotten civilization inside the cave, a civilization that predated the Incas, the Maya, even Egypt. He described entire galleries of metal books, golden plates engraved with writing, and stone inscriptions that seemed to tell the story of another world. He said the glyphs represented knowledge passed down from an ancient race, maybe even from beyond Earth. His claim was explosive, and though skeptics dismissed it as fantasy, one name made it famous: Neil Armstrong. In 1976, after his moon mission, Armstrong joined a scientific expedition to Taos Cave. His reason, officially, was exploration, but rumors spread that he wanted to see these glyphs for himself. The team, including military engineers and geologists, mapped the tunnels and collected samples. They didn't find golden libraries, but they did find chambers that defied easy explanation. Some passages seemed deliberately cut. Some walls bore symmetrical carvings unlike natural erosion. And there, deep within, faintly illuminated by the explorers' lights, were the glyphs. Photographs show them as simple incisions, but those who've been there say they carry a strange power. Not decorative, not random, but purposeful. Some align with celestial directions. Some appear to repeat patterns found in Andean ruins hundreds of miles away. Could these carvings be the remnants of a forgotten script, a proto-language that connected pre-Columbian cultures long before recorded time? The deeper you go into the Taos system, the stranger it becomes. The temperature remains constant, a perfect 20°C, and the air is unnaturally still. Bats flutter through the dark, and oil birds glide soundlessly past your head. Your light catches the glint of quartz veins, and then there it is, a line, a groove, a symbol cut into stone. Archaeologists debate whether the glyphs are man-made or the result of natural fractures and mineral flow. But the patterns are too consistent. Spirals carved into basalt don't happen by chance. The Shuar guides tell a different story. They say that the cave was once a gateway, a passage to the underworld, guarded by the spirits of those who came before. The glyphs, they believe, are not messages to be read, but prayers to be felt. Each carving, a sound turned to stone. When rainwater drips down the walls, it's said to awaken the words, carrying their meaning into the heart of the mountain. To them, the Taos Abyss is alive. Some researchers think the glyphs could date back to the late Pleistocene, at least 10,000 years old, possibly more. Others point to the polished surfaces and cut angles as signs of ancient human intervention, perhaps by a lost Andean culture that vanished without leaving a trace above ground. Geological analysis shows that some tunnels follow fault lines, but others, impossibly straight, defy natural formation. The deeper chambers appear deliberately aligned with the solstices. Coincidence or design? If true, it would mean that long before the Inca or the Olmec, people here had mastered stonework far beyond what we thought possible. Yet no tools, no bones, no artifacts were found near the glyphs, just silence. It's as if whoever carved them wanted only the message to remain, not the maker. When you imagine those ancient hands chiseling symbols by torchlight, far beneath the jungle, you begin to sense the weight of mystery pressing in. Perhaps they weren't carving words at all. Perhaps they were mapping energy, tracing the veins of the earth itself. Some of the glyphs match magnetic anomalies, others point toward the Andes, where legends speak of metallic halls beneath the mountains, hidden places of refuge during cataclysms. Could Taos be one of them? In the 1990s, a group of Ecuadorian scientists used ground-penetrating radar and found deeper voids below the known tunnels, chambers yet unexplored. Some believe that's where the bone crown of the red deer shaman. Deep in the misty mountains of Yunnan, China, lies a cavern the locals call the Cave of Red Spirits, a place where wind echoes like ancient breath and the air feels older than memory. Archaeologists know it by another name, Red Deer Cave. But to those who once lived in its shadow, it was sacred ground where the boundary between man and spirit blurred, and hidden inside its depths, beneath layers of soil and time, they found something that would shake the foundations of human history, the skull of a being unlike any other, wearing what could only be described as a crown carved from bone. It wasn't gold, it wasn't jeweled, it was raw, shaped from antlers and fitted to the skull of someone who may not have been fully human. This relic became known as the bone crown of the Red Deer Shaman. The discovery began in 1989 when researchers searching for Ice Age fossils entered a sealed chamber within the cave. What they found defied everything they expected, skeletal remains that didn't quite match our species. The skulls were thicker, the faces broader, the features ancient, almost archaic. Yet radiocarbon dating placed them at only 14,000 years ago, far too recent for such a primitive form, and among them lay something even stranger. The carved remains of a crown made from red deer antlers, clearly designed to be worn by a human head. It was a paradox. How could a people this anatomically old create something so symbolically advanced? The answer, perhaps, lies in what the crown represented. For the Red Deer Cave people, the deer wasn't just an animal, it was life itself. The deer meant food, movement, and the spirit of the forest. Its antlers, which fell and regrew each year, symbolized death and rebirth, the eternal cycle. To wear its bones upon one's head was to become part of that cycle, to take on the power of the wilderness. Whoever wore this crown was no ordinary person. They were a bridge, a shaman standing between the world of flesh and the world of spirit. The crown's craftsmanship revealed deliberate intention. The antlers were smoothed and reshaped, fitted with grooves where sinew or hide might have secured them. Ochre pigment still clung to parts of the bone, traces of red, the color of life and ritual. This was no accident of burial, it was a ceremonial artifact, the centerpiece of a forgotten belief system. And the being who wore it, that's where the mystery deepens. DNA extracted from the remains showed they were not quite like modern humans, nor Neanderthals, nor Denisovans, but something in between. It was as though an ancient lineage had survived in isolation, carrying traditions and knowledge long extinct elsewhere. When scientists reconstructed the skull, the result was eerie. Human, yes, but subtly alien. A remnant of an older world. Imagine the scene thousands of years ago, a figure standing in the firelight at the mouth of the cave, the bone crown glinting in the smoke. Around them, the tribe beats drums made of hide, chanting in rhythm to the flames. The shaman raises their hands to the sky, the antlers framing their silhouette against the flickering walls. The ritual begins, a dance that speaks to the spirits of the hunt, the wind, and the ancestors buried deep within the mountain. In that moment, man and nature were one. Archaeologists found burned deer bones arranged in deliberate patterns, possibly part of these rituals. Some skulls faced east, toward the sunrise, as if awaiting rebirth. Others were buried with pigments, tools, and offerings. This was not simple survival. This was spirituality, one older and more profound than most of us ever imagined. The Red Deer Cave people, it seemed, lived at the crossroads of humanity's story. As agriculture began elsewhere, they remained hunters, artists, mystics, guardians of an ancient way of seeing the world. Their bone crown was not a symbol of dominance, but of connection, a reminder that power once meant harmony, not control. For scientists, the implications were staggering. These people weren't supposed to exist. Modern humans were believed to have replaced all archaic species tens of thousands of years earlier, yet here was proof of a surviving lineage, still crafting symbols, performing rituals, and perhaps even passing on oral traditions that stretched back to the dawn of consciousness itself. Some researchers believe the crown may represent the earliest form of shamanic transformation, the belief that one could cross into the realm of spirits by taking on the form of an animal. That same idea appears across countless cultures: the horned priests of ancient Europe, the deer dancers of Siberia, the forest shamans of the Americas. Could this red deer shaman be their common ancestor, the root of humanity's oldest spiritual image? When you look at the bone crown today, carefully preserved in a museum display, it seems almost alive. The antlers curve like reaching hands. The bone surface still holds faint red streaks. You can see the marks where human fingers once shaped it, someone's hands, 14,000 years ago, carving devotion into the bone of another being. The more we study it, the more it challenges us. How did a species we once called primitive create something so symbolic, so human? What did they believe, standing in those fire-lit caves? And what memories lingered in their songs as the last of their kind faded into legend? Perhaps they were never truly gone. Perhaps a fragment of their vision, of nature as sacred, of spirit within all things, still flows quietly in our blood. The shaman's crown is not just a relic of bone, it is a message carved in the language of eternity. When the red deer shaman died, their people buried them with care. The crown was placed upon their head, facing east, toward the dawn. The deer bones were arranged around them in a spiral, a final gesture of respect. The fire burned for 3 days, and then the cave fell silent, until the day it was found again, thousands of years later. Standing in that chamber today, archaeologists say the air feels charged, as though the old rituals never fully ended. The scent of earth and limestone fills the lungs, and the faint echoes of dripping water sound almost like whispers. You can almost imagine the shaman still there, still guarding the cave, still wearing the crown of the red deer, waiting for humanity to remember what it once knew. The bone crown of the red deer shaman remains one of archaeology's most haunting mysteries, not because of what it is, but because of what it represents. A window into a lost world where humans and nature were one and the same, where death was not feared but honored, and where the divine was carved not in temples but in bone. And maybe, if you listen closely enough, you'll hear the rhythm of those the obsidian fang of the Archaeological Eclipse Temple. In the highlands of central Mexico, where the clouds roll low and the earth still hums with buried fire, there stands a ruined city called Xochicalco, the place of the flower house. But beneath its poetic name lies a history carved in stone and shadow. Once it was a city of astronomers and warriors, priests and builders who watched the heavens with uncanny precision. Its temples align with the stars, its tunnels with the breath of the wind. But among its many wonders, one relic outshines them all, an object black as midnight, sharp as the sun's own eclipse. They call it the obsidian fang of the Xochicalco Eclipse Temple. The story of this relic begins in a chamber buried beneath the Temple of the Feathered Serpent, a sanctuary dedicated to Quetzalcoatl, the god of light, knowledge, and rebirth. In the 1970s, archaeologists exploring the temple's substructure discovered a hidden passage sealed by limestone and ash. Inside was a ritual pit filled with shards of volcanic glass. At its center, glinting beneath centuries of dust, lay a single, perfectly carved obsidian fang, 6 inches long, curved and polished to a mirror sheen. When the light touched it, it flashed like liquid fire. At first glance, it appeared ceremonial. But when the artifact was examined under magnification, something strange emerged. Fine etchings running along its edge, not decorative but geometric. They seemed to depict solar cycles, lunar phases, and the shadow path of a total eclipse. The fang, it seemed, was not just an offering, it was a calendar, a cosmic tool forged in black glass. To understand why the people of Xochicalco would craft such a thing, we must step back into the world they lived in, a time of turbulence, when empires rose and fell, and the sky itself seemed to rule destiny. Around 700 AD, after the collapse of Teotihuacan, Xochicalco became a sanctuary for the displaced priests, scientists, and artisans who carried fragments of lost knowledge. They built their city high upon a volcanic ridge, where the stars were clearer and the air sharper, and there, they built a temple unlike any other, one that would capture the sun. At the heart of this temple lies a narrow shaft carved directly through the rock, descending into a dark chamber below. For most of the year, it sits in perfect blackness, but twice each year, during the zenith passage of the sun, A beam of light strikes the shaft at just the right angle, descending into the room and illuminating it in golden fire. To those who witnessed it, it must have felt divine, a literal spear of sunlight piercing the earth. It was in that sacred moment, when light met darkness, that the obsidian fang played its part. Ancient records, carved in glyphs and fragments, speak of a ritual called the Bite of the Sun. It was said that the priests of Xochicalco used the fang to draw the shadow from the sky during eclipses. Obsidian, born from volcanic fire, was believed to hold both light and darkness, the dual essence of creation. During an eclipse, when the sun was swallowed by the moon, the priest would raise the fang to the light's edge, capturing its final gleam in the glass. The ritual symbolized balance, that darkness was not evil, but necessary, part of the eternal cycle. When researchers analyzed the obsidian, they discovered it came from Pachuca, a volcanic region over 100 miles away, famed for its green-tinted glass. Transporting such material would have been a monumental effort, suggesting the artifact's enormous value. And curiously, microscopic residues on its surface showed traces of blood, pollen, and charcoal, the elements of sacrifice, fertility, and fire. Was it used in bloodletting rituals? Perhaps, but some believe it was more than symbolic. The fang's alignment marks correspond precisely to solar eclipses, visible from Xochicalco between 700 and 900 AD. The priests may have used it as a portable eclipse predictor, a handheld oracle carved in obsidian. Imagine the scene as it might have happened more than 1,000 years ago. The sky darkens, the air grows cold. A ring of fire blazes above the temple. The crowd below falls silent. At the pyramid's summit, the high priest kneels, holding the obsidian fang aloft. Its surface catches the fading light, reflecting a perfect miniature of the dying sun. The chant begins, slow, rhythmic, rising with the wind. The priest presses the fang to his palm, blood meeting obsidian. The eclipse completes, and for a moment, light and shadow become one. Then, as the sun re-emerges, the people cry out, "Rebirth has come again." It wasn't just a ritual, it was astronomy wrapped in myth, science spoken in the language of gods. Archaeological's builders weren't just mystics, they were observers, recording celestial cycles with precision that rivals modern instruments. Their temple was an observatory, their rituals a form of communication with the cosmos. When modern archaeologists mapped the temple's orientation, they found its axes align not only with the solar zenith, but also with the paths of Venus and the Pleiades, celestial markers critical to Mesoamerican calendars. The fang, with its eclipse glyphs, fits perfectly into that network. It was part of a greater system, a sacred science that merged spirit, time, and the sky. But the mystery doesn't end there. During restoration work in the 1980s, another anomaly appeared, traces of magnetism near the chamber where the fang was found. Obsidian itself isn't magnetic, but surrounding stones were slightly polarized, as though exposed to intense heat or electrical discharge, the kind that might accompany lightning striking the temple. Local legends tell of a star that fell to Earth, a celestial gift buried beneath the temple. Could the fang's volcanic glass have been forged from that very impact, a piece of fallen sky shaped by human hands? Whether myth or memory, the symbolism is powerful. Obsidian was always seen as divine mirror, the surface through which shamans saw other worlds. In Aztec times, obsidian mirrors were used for scrying, for summoning visions of gods and ancestors. The fang, with its precise carving and celestial etchings, may have served the same purpose, a window into cosmic truth. Over the centuries, as Xochicalco declined, the clay idol of the Ural Ridge Watchers. In the frozen heart of the Ural Mountains, where the forests whisper and the winds carry echoes older than civilization, there lies a ridge that locals call the spine of the earth. Hidden within its valleys are ruins few have ever seen, and among them, one discovery that has defied all logic. A clay idol so ancient, so intricate, that even modern science struggles to explain how it exists at all. It is known only as the clay idol of the Ural Ridge Watchers. The story begins in 1997, when a group of geologists surveying a remote section of the Ural Range stumbled upon a half-buried chamber beneath a landslide. Expecting nothing more than prehistoric animal remains, they unearthed instead a clay figure standing upright within the soil, 8 feet tall, humanoid, with wide eyes and elongated arms crossed over its chest. The statue's face was eerily human, but the expression was something else. It wasn't carved to show power or peace, but vigilance, as if it was waiting, watching. At first the idol appeared simple, molded from reddish-brown clay and hardened by time. But as researchers began to clean it, patterns emerged, swirling lines across the chest, tiny depressions along the arms, and symbols carved in microscopic precision around its base. When examined under magnification, those markings weren't random. They formed constellations, star maps that matched the night sky of the Urals, not today's, but from 12,000 years ago. That dating changed everything. The clay had been thermoluminescence tested, revealing a firing age of around 10,000 BCE, older than the pyramids, older than Göbekli Tepe. And yet, it wasn't crude. It showed advanced symmetry, balanced proportions, and an intentional use of different clay layers, as if engineered for strength. Whoever made it understood both art and material science far beyond what we thought possible for that time. The idol soon drew comparisons to another legendary artifact, the Shigir idol, found decades earlier in the same mountain range, and known as the world's oldest wooden statue. But unlike Shigir's totemic form, this clay figure seemed more alive, almost sculptural in a modern sense. And curiously, both shared one feature, a series of zigzag lines running down the torso, believed to symbolize either flowing water or energy. Archaeologists began calling these beings the Ridge Watchers, guardians placed to observe the stars and the land. Some believed they represented ancestral spirits watching over the transition between ice and earth, as glaciers receded and life returned. Others proposed something far stranger, that they marked the presence of an ancient knowledge, a forgotten civilization that existed before recorded history. One detail stood out, the idol's eyes. They were made not of clay, but of blackened mineral glass, perfectly polished and inset. When exposed to light, they reflected with an unnatural gleam, like obsidian mirrors. But under infrared scanning, those same eyes showed traces of magnetite, a mineral sensitive to magnetic fields. It was as if the statue itself had been built to sense something unseen. Local folklore only deepened the mystery. The Mansi people, whose legends trace back millennia, speak of the ridge spirits, tall, silent figures that stood before the mountains were born and watched the stars move in the sky. They were said to guard the entrances to the underworld, where the dead walked beneath the frozen rivers. And the strangest detail? They were always described as being made of earth and stone, with eyes that never slept. When researchers scanned the soil around the idol's base, they found magnetic anomalies and traces of heat vitrification, the kind produced when clay is exposed to temperatures over 1,000 °C, far higher than what ancient open fires could achieve. How could such intense heat have been generated in that era? Some suggested a natural lightning strike. Others whispered of something less natural, a burst of energy from an unknown source. The idol's location only adds to the enigma. The Ural Ridge sits at the crossroads of two tectonic plates and is known for its unusual mineral composition, rich in iron, nickel, and magnetite. It's also near sites that some researchers link to the Tunguska and Dyatlov Pass mysteries. It's as if this land has always attracted the unexplainable. The more they studied the idol, the stranger it became. The star map carved into its chest matched not only the local night sky of 10,000 BCE, but also the pattern of standing stones found miles away, suggesting the idol wasn't a solitary creation but part of a network, a prehistoric observatory system built across the Urals. The carvings even aligned with solar solstices and lunar phases, implying that whoever made it understood complex celestial cycles. But what purpose could it have served? Some archaeologists believe the idol was a ritual object, a mediator between humans and the heavens. Others think it marked the end of an age, perhaps the final witness of a lost culture that perished in the last ice age. There's also the unsettling theory that it was not meant to be seen at all. The chamber where it was found was sealed deliberately, not buried by chance. Offerings of charcoal, animal bones, and crushed red ochre surrounded it. Someone, thousands of years ago, had placed the idol underground and left it there, as if hiding it from the world. Then there's the acoustic phenomenon. When sound waves were projected inside the recovered chamber, certain frequencies caused the idol's hollow interior to resonate, producing a low hum, almost like a heartbeat. If this was intentional, it means ancient builders created a form of sonic activation, a statue that spoke through vibration. Imagine standing before it in flickering torchlight, the cold wind of the mountains pressing through the cavern mouth. The priest, or whatever name fit that ancient role, begins to chant. The echo builds, the air trembles, and the idol hums back, its deep tone filling the darkness. In that moment, it becomes something more than a sculpture. It becomes alive. Modern science can measure its density, its composition, even its age. But what no one has yet explained is its purpose. The lines, the eyes, the magnetic pulse, they all suggest design, not accident. And the face, that haunting, watchful face, it doesn't depict a god demanding worship. It depicts a being observing something beyond human reach, as if looking at us, across the bone comb of the Jomon Sea Bride. Along the mist-laced coastlines of northern Japan, where the waves crash against stone and the sea fog rolls in like ancient breath, archaeologists uncovered a relic that has reshaped how we see the earliest people of the Pacific. It was delicate, carved from bone, yet it carried a power that no jewel could match. They call it the bone comb of the Jomon Sea Bride. It was found in a seaside burial, its teeth still sharp despite the thousands of years that had passed. The grave belonged to a woman, laid to rest beside seashells, fish bones, and ornaments of shell and clay. But this was no ordinary burial. Her body had been positioned facing the horizon, her hair adorned with this intricate bone comb, an artifact unlike any other from the Jomon period, dating back nearly 5,000 years. At first glance, the comb seemed purely decorative, carved from the rib bone of a large marine animal, perhaps a whale or dolphin, but on closer inspection, tiny symbols were discovered, etched along its spine, spirals, waves, and a series of dots arranged in rhythmic patterns. The design wasn't random, it repeated a precise sequence, as if encoding a message, or perhaps a prayer. The Jomon people were among the world's first potters, known for their distinctive chord-patterned ceramics and deep connection to nature. But the craftsmanship of this comb suggested something more, a refinement of both technique and symbolism. The etchings on the comb matched motifs found in other ritual objects, ones linked to fertility, the sea, and the mysteries of life and death. Some archaeologists began to believe the comb wasn't a personal ornament at all, but a ceremonial instrument, an emblem of the sea bride herself. In Jomon folklore, long before writing existed, stories were passed through generations about Umi no Hanayome, the sea bride, a spirit who emerged from the waves to bless fishermen and guide the tides. She was both a giver of life and a bringer of storms, a being who demanded respect and offering, and in every story her symbol was the comb, the tool with which she tamed the waves of her own hair, and by extension the waves of the ocean itself. The comb from the burial matched those legends almost perfectly. When examined under scanning electron microscopes, traces of salt crystals and crushed red ochre were found between its carved grooves, evidence that it may have been used in ritual anointing. The woman buried with it may not have been an ordinary person, but a shaman, one who spoke for the sea, whose comb served as both ornament and oracle. And then came the truly strange part. Embedded near the base of the comb were microscopic fragments of coral and obsidian. The coral could have come from coastal reefs nearby, but the obsidian volcanic glass came from hundreds of kilometers away, from the island of Hokkaido. This meant the comb wasn't just a local object. It had traveled, or been traded, across great distances. It connected different Jomon communities through ritual and story, evidence of a cultural network long before written history. The comb's design also mirrored natural patterns, the flow of water, the arc of waves, even the rhythm of lunar cycles. When mapped digitally, the dots etched into it corresponded to a 29-day sequence, the length of a lunar month. Was it a calendar, tracking tides and seasons? Or perhaps a symbol of transformation, the moon's phases mirroring life, death, and rebirth, through the sea bride's legend? One discovery made the mystery even deeper. When placed under ultraviolet light, faint residue appeared on the comb's teeth, traces of an organic dye, possibly derived from seaweed or squid ink. The dye glowed faintly, revealing an unseen pattern, the outline of a figure, feminine, flowing, crowned with waves. A hidden image, invisible in daylight, meant to appear only under specific conditions. Could it have been part of a ritual, revealed by firelight or phosphorescent glow at night? The coastal cave where it was found told its own story. Layers of ash, bones, and shells suggested centuries of occupation and repeated rituals. At its entrance, archaeologists found small pits filled with stones shaped like miniature combs, as if offerings left to the sea. The people here had a relationship with the ocean that was not simply survival, it was communion. The Jomon civilization thrived for millennia in Japan, long before agriculture or centralized power. They were hunters, gatherers, and fishers who lived in harmony with their environment. But they were also deeply spiritual, their world filled with spirits in trees, stones, and tides. The bone comb of the sea bride captures that belief perfectly, a meeting point between human craft and natural mystery, between art and ritual. One researcher, Dr. Keiko Tanaka, described it best. This wasn't an accessory, it was a language, one written in bone, sea, and moonlight. Over time, more artifacts from the same region have been discovered. Shell bracelets carved with matching symbols, fish-shaped pendants, and clay figures depicting women with exaggerated hair patterns, as if echoing the sea bride's mythic image. Each discovery adds another line to the same forgotten poem. But there's another layer, one almost supernatural. Local fishermen, even today, tell tales of strange lights over the sea near the excavation site. They call them umi no hai, the sea fires. Some say they appear when the tides are high and the wind is calm, flickering blue above the waves like spirits moving between worlds. Scientists attribute them to bioluminescent algae, yet to those who still honor the old stories, they're signs that the sea bride still stirs beneath the surface. The comb itself is now kept in a museum in Tokyo, displayed behind glass, its carved symbols highlighted by soft lighting. But for those who stand before it, there's something undeniably haunting about it, the sense that it's not just an object of the past, but a voice that still whispers across time. The bone comb of the Jomon sea bride reminds us that beauty and belief are often inseparable. For the Jomon people, art wasn't decoration, it was devotion. Every line etched into bone was a story, every curve a prayer, and through this small, fragile relic we glimpse the soul of a people who saw no boundary between the sea and the sacred. When the waves crash against Japan's ancient shores and the salt wind cuts through the pines, it's easy to imagine her, the sea bride, standing where the earth meets the ocean, her hair glistening, her comb gliding through it as the tide follows her rhythm. Perhaps that's the power this artifact still carries. Not the ability to explain, but to remind us that even the smallest creation can hold the weight of the divine. The bone comb of the Jomon sea bride isn't just a relic, it's a song, a melody from a vanished world, still echoing the stone stello of the Bactrian flamekeepers. In the wind-swept plains of northern Afghanistan, where the mountains of Bactria rise from the desert like the bones of forgotten gods, archaeologists uncovered a relic that burns through the fog of time, a towering slab of stone carved with symbols of fire, devotion, and power. They call it the stone stello of the Bactrian flamekeepers. It was found by accident, during a survey near the ruins of an ancient fortress along the Amu Darya River. At first only a corner of the stela was visible, a smooth surface protruding from the sand. But as excavation began, the full monument emerged. Nearly 3 meters tall, weighing close to 4 tons, its surface covered in relief carvings that shimmered in the desert light. The symbols were strange, flames rising from hands, circular emblems surrounding stylized eyes, and figures holding torches toward the sky. Carbon traces at its base suggested it once stood near a perpetual flame, a sacred fire that may have burned for centuries. The site's layout revealed something even more astonishing. Concentric altars, channels for oil or incense, and blackened stones arranged in geometric precision. Whoever built this place wasn't merely worshipping fire, they were guarding it. The stelo's craftsmanship was extraordinary. Made from dense limestone, it was carved with microscopic precision, showing techniques of smoothing and incising that predated iron tools. Radiocarbon samples from surrounding layers dated the site to around 1800 BCE, at the height of the Bactria Margiana Archaeological Complex, or BMAC, an enigmatic Bronze Age civilization that thrived between the Oxus and the Hindu Kush. But this stelo stood apart from other BMAC relics. It wasn't adorned with animals or fertility symbols. It was devoted entirely to flame, its movement, its symbolism, its divinity. The top panel depicted a figure cloaked in rays, holding a vessel of fire in both hands. The eyes were inlaid with lapis lazuli, still glinting beneath layers of dust. Beneath the figure, lines of script ran in a language no one could read, fragments of what might have been Proto-Avestan, the earliest form of the tongue that would later carry the hymns of Zoroaster. When sunlight hit the stela, at midday, its upper carvings caught the light so that the flames seemed to flicker, an intentional optical illusion created by alternating deep and shallow cuts. It wasn't just art, it was theater. It made the stone come alive, echoing the worship of the eternal fire that would later define Zoroastrianism. The Bactrian flamekeepers, as the excavation team named them, may have been among the first priests of light, guardians of a sacred flame that symbolized purity, creation, and the link between heaven and earth. The stela's presence suggests that fire temples existed here long before written religion, predating the Persian empires by millennia. What captivated researchers most was the wear pattern along the base of the stela, shallow depressions formed not by weather but by human contact. Thousands of hands, it seemed, had touched the same spot over centuries. Traces of oil and resin were embedded in the grooves, offerings, perhaps, anointed during prayers to the flame. It was as if the stela itself had absorbed generations of devotion. Bactria was no isolated land. It sat at the crossroads of ancient trade routes connecting Mesopotamia, the Indus Valley, and Central Asia. Merchants, nomads, and mystics passed through its valleys, carrying goods and ideas. The stele may have been part of a sanctuary, where travelers came to light torches from the eternal flame, carrying its fire across continents as a symbol of protection. When archaeologists mapped the site, they found that the stele's orientation aligned perfectly with the sunrise at the summer solstice. At dawn, the first light of the year's longest day would strike the figure's face, illuminating it in gold while the rest remained in shadow. This wasn't coincidence, it was design, a deliberate act of cosmic reverence. Around the stele lay fragments of pottery bearing soot stains, small bronze tools, and charred grains of barley, proof of ritual feasts or sacrifices. One layer contained a peculiar object, a small lens carved from rock crystal. When held up, it focused sunlight into a single burning point. Some scholars believe this was used to ignite the sacred flame anew each year, a ceremony of rebirth symbolizing the eternal struggle between darkness and light. Local legends preserved by nomads still tell of a pillar of flame that once stood in these mountains, a beacon seen for miles at night. They say that when the last of the flame keepers died, the fire sank into the earth, leaving only a stone behind. To the elders, this stele isn't a relic, it's a tombstone for a god. Even today, the ruins feel charged. Researchers working there report inexplicable heat signatures in the soil near the altar, as if something still smolders deep below. Magnetometers pick up fluctuations, and drones show faint light anomalies during dusk. Skeptics dismiss them as natural effects, but those who have stood before the stele at sunrise say otherwise. They speak of a stillness, a pulse in the air, as though the stone remembers the warmth it once carried. The inscriptions remain undeciphered. Linguists have identified recurring symbols resembling early Proto-Iranian glyphs for flame, life, and sky, but others defy classification. One repeating phrase, 3 triangles stacked atop one another, appears on several nearby stones and has been interpreted as the mark of the flame keepers themselves. In 2021, digital imaging revealed faint pigment traces, red ochre, gold dust, and a rare blue dye, suggesting the stele was once vividly painted. Its flames were crimson and gold, its eyes sapphire blue, its background blackened like soot. In its prime, it must have gleamed under torchlight, a living pillar of color and fire in the darkened temple. Perhaps what makes this stele so haunting isn't just its beauty or age, but its silence. Every culture that followed, from Persia to India, kept fragments of its story. The sacred fire, the eternal light, the guardians of purity. Yet the Bactrian version, the original, vanished without a trace. No temples remain standing. The bone mask of the Kavskol shaman. High in the northern reaches of Mongolia, where the frozen winds of the Kavskol region sweep across endless tundra and the lakes shimmer like sheets of ancient glass, a discovery was made that defied all logic. A mask carved entirely from human bone, found deep inside a burial mound, older than any written record of the steppe tribes. They call it the bone mask of the Kavskol shaman. It was unearthed during a thawing summer, when melting permafrost exposed a cluster of stones along a forgotten ridge overlooking Lake Kavskol. Beneath them lay a burial unlike any seen before, a circular chamber of wood and ice, sealed with animal hides and lined with shards of obsidian. Inside, archaeologists found the remains of a single individual, a shaman, judging by the ritual tools placed around the body. But the centerpiece was something beyond belief. A mask, fashioned from overlapping fragments of human skull, jawbone and ribs, assembled with sinew and bronze pins into a haunting visage of power. The mask was built to be worn, lightweight, curved to fit the human face, with hollow eyes that seemed to stare straight through whoever looked upon them. The surface bore carvings of animal spirits, wolves, birds, and antlered figures, etched so delicately they shimmered like frost under torchlight. Around the edges, remnants of hair and dyed leather straps suggested it was once adorned with feathers or fur, perhaps symbolizing transformation during ritual trance. Carbon dating placed the burial at roughly 1500 BCE, making it one of the oldest ritual masks ever found in the Siberian Mongolian region. But what truly shocked researchers wasn't its age, it was its composition. The bone fragments came from at least 5 different individuals, both male and female, each one meticulously shaped and fitted together as though the mask itself represented a fusion of souls. This discovery ignited fierce debate among anthropologists. Was this an act of reverence, merging the ancestors into one sacred object, or an act of dark shamanic power where the dead were bound into servitude through bone? The answer, perhaps, lies in the stories still told by the Tsuotin herders who live near Lake Kavskol. They speak of the spirit faces, masks worn by ancient shamans who walked between worlds, calling the souls of the dead to guide or protect their tribe. When such a shaman died, his mask was buried with him, never to be touched again, for to disturb it would awaken the spirits trapped within. When the archaeologists lifted the mask from its icy cradle, they found beneath it a small copper bowl filled with scorched herbs and fragments of charred teeth, evidence of ritual burning. The air around the chamber reportedly carried a faint scent of smoke and resin, even though the fire had gone out thousands of years ago. The soil beneath the burial was blackened, as if scorched from within. Further analysis revealed traces of mercury and arsenic in the mask's surface, materials known to have been used in ancient rituals to preserve and charge sacred objects. Some of the bones had been coated in a resin made from tree sap and animal fat, giving the mask an unnatural sheen. Under ultraviolet light, faint symbols appeared, spirals, eyes, and what seemed to be a pattern of teeth arranged in a circle. Linguists identified these markings as precursors to Proto-Turkic spirit symbols, possibly representing the eternal blue sky, the supreme power worshipped by steppe peoples long before recorded history. It suggested the Kavskol shaman might have been part of an unbroken spiritual lineage stretching from Siberia to Central Asia, from whom later Tengri beliefs evolved. The positioning of the mask in the grave was deliberate. It wasn't placed on the shaman's face but set upright on a carved wooden stand facing east toward the rising sun. His own skull had been painted with red ochre and surrounded by animal bones, eagle claws, reindeer antlers, and the jaw of a wolf. To the ancient tribes, the mask may have represented the shaman's spirit after death, an eternal guardian watching over the living from the direction of dawn. Nearby, archaeologists found a drum made from reindeer hide stretched over a bone frame. When struck lightly, even after thousands of years, it still produced a faint vibration, like a heartbeat echoing through the frozen silence. Many believe that sound was meant to call spirits, or perhaps remind them they were never truly gone. What makes this discovery even stranger is the effect the mask seemed to have on those who handled it. Several members of the excavation team reported vivid dreams of fire and flight, of standing atop icy cliffs surrounded by antlered figures. Some dismissed it as exhaustion or suggestion, but the stories spread quickly among the locals, who begged the researchers to rebury the mask before the spirits followed them home. Eventually, the mask was transported to Ulaanbaatar for preservation under controlled conditions, though even there, technicians noted inexplicable temperature drops in its display room and flickering lights that couldn't be traced to electrical faults. To this day, the curators refused to keep it uncovered overnight. Scientific studies later confirmed something remarkable. The mask emitted low-frequency electromagnetic waves, likely caused by mineral interaction between the bone and metallic elements. While some argued it was purely natural, others wondered if ancient shamans might have noticed the same sensation and interpreted it as the object's spiritual pulse, the literal heartbeat of the ancestors. But the real enigma lies in its craftsmanship. The bone joints were fused with a heat process far too advanced for the time, requiring temperatures that nomadic tribes shouldn't have been able to reach. It suggests knowledge of metallurgy, or techniques long thought to have arrived in the region centuries later. Who taught them? Where did this skill come from? No one knows. As the snow returns each winter to cover the Kovsgol plains, the burial site sleeps again beneath the ice. Local shamans still visit from distant regions, bringing offerings of milk and juniper smoke to honor the unknown spirit once buried there. They whisper to the frozen wind that the mask still watches, that the Kovsgol shaman was not merely a man, but a messenger between worlds, his voice carried through bone and fire. Standing before the mask today, one feels an unsettling mix of awe and unease. Its empty eyes seem alive, reflecting the light in ways that mimic motion. The faint grooves of the carved animals appear to shift as shadows pass, as if the spirits within are still awake, waiting for the call of the drum. The bone mask of the Kovsgol shaman is more than an artifact. It's a threshold, a frozen memory of a world where death was not an end, but a doorway. A reminder that the line between the living and the dead was once crossed, not with fear, but with reverence, and somewhere beneath the eternal frost of Kovsgol, perhaps the spirits still listen, waiting for the day when the mask is worn again, and the shaman's voice rises once more to speak to the wind. The fossil shrine of the Enedi Plateau. Deep within the remote heart of the Sahara Desert lies the Enedi Plateau, a place so isolated and surreal it feels suspended between worlds. Vast sandstone towers rise like ancient fortresses, sculpted by the wind over millennia. Hidden among these monumental cliffs, far from any road or village, lies a site that defies explanation, a fossil shrine carved into stone, older than recorded memory, known today as the fossil shrine of the Enedi Plateau. This discovery would challenge archaeologists, mystify geologists, and awaken questions that seem to blur the line between human history and something far older. The story begins with a group of explorers in the 1990s, traveling through Chad's northern deserts in search of prehistoric cave art. The Enedi Plateau is famous for its ancient rock paintings, depictions of cattle, hunters, and spirits that date back thousands of years. But what they stumbled upon was something far beyond simple art. In a narrow canyon, half buried in sand, they found what looked like an altar, circular, made from fossilized rock that glimmered faintly under the sun. Embedded within it were vertebrae, shells, and fragments of creatures long extinct, not scattered by nature, but arranged deliberately, like an offering frozen in stone. At first, scientists believed it was a natural formation, perhaps the fossilized remains of an ancient seabed exposed by erosion. But further study revealed a different story. The fossils were placed in a pattern, concentric rings surrounding a flat central slab, etched with strange grooves and symbols. Someone had gathered these remnants of ancient life and built them into a shrine. The implications were staggering. The Enedi Plateau was once lush, filled with lakes, rivers, and wildlife. Thousands of years ago, it was a green paradise in what is now one of Earth's harshest deserts. Nomadic tribes painted its cliffs and carved its shelters, but this shrine seemed older, predating even those civilizations. Carbon dating of surrounding materials suggested that human hands may have touched this site more than 10,000 years ago, around the same time as Göbekli Tepe, when the Sahara was just beginning to dry. Who would have built such a thing? And more importantly, why? Local legends tell of the spirits of stone, ancient beings said to have lived in the cliffs before the first humans came. They spoke of a gate of bones, where life and death met under the watch of the desert winds. To some, this fossil shrine fit those stories perfectly, a sacred place where early humans may have tried to preserve the memory of a dying world. The fossils, the bones of fish, crocodiles, and sea creatures, were once symbols of abundance. As the rains faded and the rivers vanished, perhaps the people of Eneti built this shrine as a plea to the gods of water and life. Archaeologists studying the site found more than fossils. They uncovered faint carvings on the surrounding rocks, spirals, handprints, and patterns resembling waves. The fossils themselves seemed polished, as if they had been deliberately handled. Around the altar were small fragments of charcoal and burnt bones, signs of ritual fires. The site wasn't just a curiosity, it was a ceremonial ground, a place where ancient people gathered to commune with something greater than themselves. But the deeper researchers dug, the stranger it became. Beneath the fossil layer, they found another chamber. A hollow cavity lined with sandstone and fossil shells, arranged in a spiral pattern leading inward. At its center was a large fossilized vertebra, possibly from a prehistoric whale, positioned upright like a totem. It appeared intentional, as though the people who built this structure were recreating the cycle of life and death, using the remains of an ancient sea to honor forces they could scarcely comprehend. How did they even find these fossils? The Sahara's shifting sands hide countless secrets, but these fossils had been carefully gathered, possibly from faraway locations. Some species embedded in the shrine didn't belong to the Eneti region at all, suggesting they were carried or traded across vast distances. It points to an early understanding of symbolism, trade, and even geology, long before such concepts existed in recorded history. Modern geologists proposed another eerie possibility, that the shrine was built during the transition from the Green Sahara to the desert we know today, a time of catastrophic droughts, climate shifts, and mass migrations. To those ancient people, the drying world must have seemed like the end of creation. The fossil shrine could have been their monument to the lost age of water, a temple built not for gods, but for memory itself. Even today, visitors who reach the plateau describe an atmosphere unlike anywhere else on Earth. The silence is absolute. The wind seems to whisper through the rock formations, carrying a haunting resonance. Standing before the fossil altar, one feels both small and connected, as if time itself folds in that place. Every shell and bone embedded in the stone speaks of life that once was, preserved through ritual and sand. When high-resolution 3D scans were made of the site, new details emerged. Faint etchings of what looked like sun rays, running water, and spiral motifs similar to those found in Neolithic Europe. Could there have been shared ideas, a symbolic language of life and death, stretching across continents and cultures that never met? The patterns seemed too deliberate to dismiss as coincidence. Anthropologists also noted an uncanny alignment. The fossil altar faces the direction of the setting sun during the equinox. Whether intentional or accidental, it adds another layer of mystery. Was the shrine built to align with celestial cycles, marking the passage of seasons in a world on the brink of transformation? In recent years, the fossil shrine has become a fragile relic, threatened by erosion, sandstorms, and human neglect. Yet researchers continue to document and preserve it, understanding that what it represents goes beyond archaeology. It's a reminder that humans have always sought meaning in the natural world, even when that world was collapsing around them. Perhaps the most haunting thought is this: the builders of the fossil shrine lived through the death of an ecosystem. They watched their lakes dry and their rivers vanish, just as we witness changes in our own time. Maybe their shrine wasn't only about the past, but a warning, carved in the bones of a vanished sea, left for whoever would come next. The fossil shrine of the Eneti Plateau remains one of the most enigmatic sites in Africa, a fusion of geology, art, and spirituality that transcends the limits of known history. Whether it was a memorial to the lost waters of the Sahara, a ritual gateway to the spirit world, or a message from a forgotten civilization, its presence forces us to confront the vast timeline of human memory. Standing before the shell crown of the Dogon Skywatchers, high above the sweeping plains of Mali, where sandstone cliffs rise like great stone fortresses, the Dogon people have lived for centuries, preserving stories, rituals, and knowledge that have fascinated the world for generations. Their home, the Bandiagra Escarpment, is a landscape of timeless silence, a labyrinth of cliffs and caves where past and present seem to intertwine. But hidden deep within one of these caves lies a relic that has stirred both awe and debate among historians and anthropologists alike, a headdress unlike any other, woven from ancient fibers and encrusted with marine shells found hundreds of miles from the sea. It is known as the shell crown of the Dogon Skywatchers. At first glance, it looks like a ceremonial headpiece, delicate and regal, but its design tells a far older story. The crown is made not of gold or bronze, but of woven plant fiber, bone, and cowrie shells. each shell arranged in spiral patterns, forming what appears to be constellations. Around its edge are faint carvings, symbols that resemble both celestial maps and the flowing lines of the Milky Way. To the Dogon elders, this was not mere decoration, it was a map of the heavens, a sacred tool used by their ancient priests, the Sky Watchers, who once observed the stars to mark the rhythms of life, death, and rebirth. The Dogon have long intrigued scholars with their detailed astronomical traditions, stories that speak of invisible stars and cosmic events known to modern science only in recent centuries. For generations, they've told of Sirius, the brightest star in the night sky, and its companion, a dense invisible star that circles it in a long orbit. When Western astronomers confirmed the existence of Sirius B in the 20th century, the world was stunned. How could a remote tribe in West Africa have known of a celestial object invisible to the naked eye and recorded in their mythology for hundreds, perhaps thousands of years? The shell crown, discovered in a sealed stone chamber near the cliffs, may hold part of that answer. When archaeologists examined it, they noticed that the arrangement of shells and symbols appeared to correspond not just to Sirius, but to an entire star cluster, one that played a central role in Dogon cosmology. Some patterns matched celestial alignments visible over 5,000 years ago. Could this crown be a relic from an era when early observers of the sky recorded the heavens through art, ritual, and memory long before written astronomy existed? The chamber where the crown was found adds to the mystery. Inside were murals painted in ochre and white, depicting human figures with elongated heads, surrounded by spirals, waves, and dots. Some figures appeared to hold staffs topped with circular emblems resembling stars or planets. These weren't simple depictions of gods. They seemed to show people studying the heavens, marking patterns in the sky. Beneath one mural lay the shell crown, carefully wrapped in layers of woven reed and preserved in dry air for centuries. It was not buried with a king or warrior, but with a priest, one whose burial included offerings of polished stones, charred millet, and carved figurines facing upward, as if watching the stars. Researchers have tried to decode the Dogon myths that surround the Sky Watchers. Their legends speak of beings called the Namo, ancestral spirits said to have descended from the sky in a great vessel that shimmered like metal and roared like thunder. The Namo taught humans the secrets of agriculture, water, and the stars. For the Dogon, these were not mere myths but sacred truths, woven into ceremonies, dances, and symbols that survive to this day. Some anthropologists interpret the story as a poetic memory of ancient contact between cultures, perhaps a record of early seafarers or traders who shared knowledge of the cosmos. Others, more mystically inclined, wonder if it speaks of something greater, a message encoded from a forgotten epoch of human civilization. The crown itself bears traces of both earthly and celestial symbolism. The cowrie shells, once currency and symbols of fertility, are arranged to mirror constellations such as Orion, Canis Major, and the Pleiades. The crown's crest, a vertical ridge adorned with fossilized fish vertebrae, may represent the path of the Namo, whose domain was water and sky. To the Dogon, water and stars are deeply linked, both sources of life, both infinite, both unknowable. The fusion of marine shells and cosmic patterns on the crown seems to embody that belief, a merging of earth and heaven, life and eternity. Yet what baffles historians most is the craftsmanship and antiquity of the artifact. Radiocarbon dating suggests the fibers are at least 1,500 years old, possibly older, but oral histories push its origin much further, back to a mythical time when the Dogon migrated from lands far east, guided by their sky teachers. The crown, according to elders, was not made, it was reborn during a sacred ritual, reconstructed each generation using shells gathered in secret ceremonies. Each shell represented a soul, each pattern a story. The act of remaking it was itself a cosmic ritual, ensuring that knowledge would never die, even if memory faded. When modern researchers attempted to map the crown's design digitally, they discovered a striking coincidence. The arrangement of shells matched a star field visible around 3200 BCE, including Sirius, Orion, and a faint cluster near Taurus. If intentional, this means the design preserved an ancient snapshot of the sky from more than 5,000 years ago. For a culture that predates modern astronomy, such precision seems impossible, unless it was inherited knowledge, passed down through rituals and symbols so sacred they survived the erosion of time. The Dogon Skywatchers used their sacred caves as both observatories and sanctuaries. Carvings along the cliff walls align with the sun's path during solstices, and small holes drilled into rock mark the rising points of key stars. Standing on those cliffs at night, under an untouched Saharan sky, one can imagine how their ancestors once watched the heavens, tracking celestial cycles long before telescopes or charts. The shell crown, in that sense, was more than a symbol, it was an instrument, a map, and a reminder of the cosmic order that governed both the heavens above and the world below. Local oral traditions say that when the crown was worn, the priest who carried the fossil altar of the Makran Coast tomb. Along the desolate shores of Pakistan's Makran Coast, where the Arabian Sea meets cliffs of salt and stone, lies a land so ancient that the earth itself seems to remember. Here, wind carves the sand into ghostly shapes, and waves crash against fossilized seabeds older than civilization. The Makran is a place of silence, vast, shimmering, and timeless. Yet, buried within this stark landscape lies one of the most perplexing archaeological enigmas of the region, a tomb unlike any other, containing what researchers now call the fossil altar. It was discovered by accident. In 2018, a small group of geologists surveying the Makran cliffs stumbled upon a stone structure partially exposed by a recent landslide. What they first mistook for an eroded cave wall turned out to be the entrance to a man-made chamber, a tomb sealed by slabs of fossilized limestone. Inside, the air was dry and heavy, untouched for centuries. At the center of the chamber stood a raised platform carved from a single massive fossil bed. Embedded within the stone were hundreds of ancient marine shells and the remains of extinct sea creatures, ammonites, crinoids, and coral, all fused together to form a surface of eerie beauty. The platform was not flat, but slightly concave, with channels that seemed designed to guide liquid, perhaps offerings of water, oil, or blood. Around its edges were carved spirals and circular patterns, symbols that resembled the movement of tides or celestial orbits. But what truly confounded the team was the figure carved into the head of the altar. A human form, half buried in fossilized coral, its eyes wide and mouth open, as if frozen mid-chant. It looked less like a statue and more like someone who had been turned to stone. Locals had long whispered of an ancient tomb along this stretch of coast, a place where the sea turned to stone and where a sleeping priest guarded the bones of the ocean. These stories were often dismissed as folklore, tales told by fishermen to explain the strange fossil cliffs that line the shore. But the discovery of the fossil altar reignited those old myths and raised a haunting question. Who built this tomb, and why was an altar made from the remains of an ancient sea placed within it? The Makran Coast has always been a place of transitions, between land and sea, myth and history. It lies along one of the world's most active geological zones, where tectonic plates collide and the earth rises from the ocean. Over millions of years, the sea here has advanced and retreated countless times, leaving behind entire fossilized ecosystems. The very stones that form the cliffs were once the ocean floor, filled with the memory of creatures that vanished long before humans walked the earth. To the ancient people of Makran, this landscape must have felt alive, sacred even, a place where earth and sea exchanged souls. The tomb's interior walls were covered in petroglyphs, not of animals or humans, but of waves, spirals, and geometric designs. In the flicker of torchlight they seemed to move, as if the walls themselves were breathing. The patterns bore a striking resemblance to motifs found in ancient Baluchistan and even early Mesopotamian cultures, yet no written language accompanied them. Instead, there were lines of dots and concentric rings, arranged in sequences that seemed to follow lunar and tidal cycles. One archaeologist proposed that the tomb was aligned with both the sea and the stars, a sacred observatory and burial site combined. As excavations continued, they uncovered the skeletal remains of a single individual laid beneath the fossil altar. The bones were unusually preserved, encased in a crust of mineral deposits as if slowly fossilizing. Around the skeleton were offerings, carved shells, beads of mother-of-pearl, and a series of small stone discs etched with spiral patterns. Most strikingly, a fossilized ammonite had been placed directly upon the skull, like a crown. In ancient symbolism, the ammonite, a spiral fossil, often represented eternity, rebirth, and the cyclical nature of life. Could this have been a priest or shaman who served as a bridge between the living and the sea itself? Carbon dating placed the burial between 2000 and 1500 BCE, roughly contemporary with the late Indus Valley civilization. But the style of the carvings and the materials used were unlike anything found in the Indus cities. There were no bricks, no seals, no inscriptions, only stone and fossil. It was as if the builders had chosen to use the bones of the earth itself as their medium. Some researchers now believe the Makran tomb may have belonged to a coastal culture that interacted with both the Indus and Mesopotamian worlds, yet remained distinct, a maritime people whose rituals were tied to the ancient sea. But one detail continues to puzzle everyone: the altar's orientation. When mapped, the concave surface and carved channels align precisely with the path of the moon during equinox tides, the highest and lowest waters of the year. During those nights, when moonlight strikes through the tomb's narrow entrance, it illuminates the fossil altar directly, causing the embedded shells to shimmer like living things. To the ancients, this would have been a vision of divine power, the sea returning to life under the gaze of the moon. Myths from the Makran region still speak of the Tidekeeper, a being who guarded the balance between land and ocean. According to oral lore, when humans first settled along the Makran coast, they angered the sea by taking too much from it. Fish, shells, coral, storms and quakes followed, drowning entire villages. In their desperation, the people offered their wisest man to the ocean, but when the waves receded, they found his body turned to stone, surrounded by the bones of ancient sea creatures. They built a tomb around him, believing he had merged with the spirit of the sea. The fossil altar, they said, was his throne. This legend eerily mirrors the archaeological discovery. Could this be the same story, a memory preserved through millennia, describing a real burial that became myth? Some scholars think the tale may encode an ancient tsunami or tectonic event, remembered as divine punishment. Others see in it a metaphor for human sacrifice, the offering of one life to appease the forces of nature. But whatever its meaning, the story persists, whispered among coastal villages even today. Geologically, the Makran coast is known for mud volcanoes, natural vents that spew gas, oil and mineral-rich mud. Many ancient shrines were built. The shell mask of the Chachapoya Cloud Temple. High in the misty mountains of northern Peru, where clouds drift like ghosts between the cliffs, the ruins of an ancient civilization sleep beneath the moss. They were called the Chachapoya, the people of the clouds. Few outside scholars knew their name, until explorers stumbled upon their mountaintop citadels in the late 20th century, swallowed by forest and time. But among the many relics found in their lost temples, one discovery stood apart, an artifact so haunting that even hardened archaeologists fell silent when the earth revealed it. A mask, carved not from gold or stone but from the ocean itself. It became known as the shell mask of the Chachapoya Cloud Temple. It was unearthed in 2019 by a small Peruvian and German expedition studying a recently mapped ruin near Cuelap, a forgotten sanctuary built on a narrow ridge more than 9,000 feet above sea level. The site, half hidden by orchids and strangler figs, was known to locals as La Casa de las Nubes, the House of Clouds. Beneath a collapsed chamber wall, buried under layers of clay and bone, they found a sealed wooden chest, astonishingly preserved by centuries of cold mist and mineral soil. Inside, wrapped in woven llama wool, was a mask made entirely of iridescent shell fragments, fitted together like mosaic scales. Even after centuries, it shimmered faintly in the mountain light, like frozen moonlight. Each piece of shell came from species found hundreds of kilometers away: Pacific conch, spondylus, and even mother-of-pearl from Ecuador's coast. Yet the Chachapoya lived deep inland, in the heart of the Andes. The question was immediate and unsettling. How had a mountain people acquired materials from the ocean, and why had they shaped them into a human face? The mask's design was unlike anything known from Chachapoya art. It wasn't purely ornamental. Its proportions were precise, even anatomical. The eyes were hollow, lined with obsidian. The mouth was open, shaped as if mid-breath. The edges were smooth and polished, suggesting it had once been worn. But what struck the team most was what lay behind it. Pressed into the interior surface were faint traces of red pigment and fragments of human hair, as if the mask had once been fused to a living or mummified face. Nearby, carved into the temple wall, were symbols that seemed to merge celestial and marine imagery: suns surrounded by spiral waves, figures standing between mountain peaks and curling tides. The high priest of the Chachapoya, it seemed, worshipped not just the clouds but also the sea, a paradox for a people who lived far above it. One archaeologist called it the theology of the horizon, a belief that heaven and ocean were reflections of one another, two mirrors meeting at the edge of the world. When the mask was examined under spectral light, the shell fragments revealed something extraordinary: patterns of micro-etching along their surfaces, invisible to the naked eye. Under magnification, they formed sequences of spirals, lines, and dots, like constellations. Some matched actual star clusters seen from the Andes during solstice months. Others resembled deep-sea shell growth patterns. It was as if the mask's makers were drawing a bridge between sky and sea, encoding both into a single sacred object. But the real mystery came when radiocarbon dating and isotopic tests were completed. The mask was older than the temple itself, by nearly 400 years. That meant it had been an heirloom, carried across generations before being entombed. And the shells used to make it came from the Pacific coast, a trade distance of nearly 500 kilometers through jungle and mountains. For the Chachapoya, hauling something so fragile across such terrain would have been a monumental effort. It wasn't jewelry, it was pilgrimage. Local legends speak of the Bride of the Sea, a priestess who, according to myth, walked from the ocean up into the clouds, carrying the voice of the waves in her chest. Wherever she went, the rains followed. In some versions, she wore a face of shining shells, and when she died, her mask was buried in the sky so the sea could still see her. For generations, her story was dismissed as poetic folklore until the discovery of the shell mask. Could this artifact have belonged to that mythic figure, a priestess who bridged two worlds? In Chachapoya burial rituals, masks were not common. Only the highest spiritual figures, the whisperers, those believed to speak between the dead and the living, were given masks to carry their voice into the afterlife. The combination of marine shell and mountain symbol suggests the mask was more than ceremonial. It was a key, a channel between realms. As excavations continued, the team uncovered a circular platform beneath the mask's resting place. Its surface was etched with spiral grooves designed to direct rainwater into a single basin at the center. When mist condensed on the stones, droplets would flow inward, creating the illusion of the mountain drinking from the clouds. The symbolism was profound, water rising from sea to sky, and returning as rain. The temple itself was an embodiment of that eternal exchange. The lead archaeologist, Dr. Salazar, described standing in the chamber one dawn as fog rolled through the broken walls. It was like being inside a living lung, she said. The air moved, the stone breathed, and I could almost hear the sound of waves, miles from the ocean. When sunlight hit the mask's fragments that morning, they reflected a spectrum of colors, not unlike the shifting hues of water seen from beneath the surface. What the researchers didn't expect was what came next. Weeks later, ground radar revealed a secondary chamber beneath the first, a sealed crypt. Inside were the remains of 5 individuals, seated in a ring, their skulls painted white and adorned with smaller shell fragments. At the center lay an empty pedestal. The team now believes the mask had originally been placed there, perhaps worn by the central figure during ritual, then removed and interred above as an offering. It wasn't merely a funerary object, it was part of a living ceremony, one that merged death, sky, and sea into a single act of worship. Modern DNA tests on organic residue found behind the mask revealed traces of marine microorganisms, species that could only have come from deep ocean shells. Even after centuries, the artifact still carried microscopic life from the Pacific. That discovery deepened the myth. The mask truly contained the sea. To the Chachapoya, it wasn't symbolic, it was literal. Wearing it was to breathe the ocean's spirit into the clouds. Today the mask is kept the stone stele of the Mitanni flamekeepers. In the dry highlands of northern Syria, where the wind sweeps endlessly across the ruins of forgotten kingdoms, a discovery was made that reignited the story of one of the most enigmatic civilizations of the ancient world, the Mitanni. Hidden beneath layers of sun-baked earth, within the remnants of what was once a great ceremonial complex, archaeologists uncovered a single upright stone stele, unlike any they had seen before. Carved from black basalt, its surface shimmered faintly with a strange glass-like polish. The inscriptions upon it were faint yet deliberate, precise lines that seemed almost to burn under the desert sun. It came to be known as the stone stele of the Mitanni flamekeepers. The Mitanni Empire flourished more than 3,500 years ago, between the Tigris and the Euphrates, at the crossroads of Mesopotamia and Anatolia. They were a people of warriors, horse-tamers, and mystics, their culture woven from the threads of Hurrian, Hittite, and even early Indo-Aryan influence. For centuries, their name survived only in passing mentions from Assyrian and Egyptian texts, a shadow in history. But the stele changed everything. For the first time, archaeologists could peer into the Mitanni's inner world, their beliefs, their rituals, and their reverence for what they called the eternal flame of the gods. When the stele was first unearthed near Tel Brak in 2018, it stood upright, as if purposefully buried, rather than toppled by time. Around it were traces of scorched earth, layers of charcoal, and fragments of ceramic vessels blackened by heat. It was clear that the site had once been used for fire rituals, offerings to unseen forces. But what drew the greatest attention was the imagery carved upon the stele's face. A tall, robed figure holding a torch, surrounded by spiraling lines that seemed to rise upward like flames transforming into stars. Below it, a series of cuneiform symbols told a cryptic story, one that scholars struggled to translate. As linguists began to work through the inscriptions, they realized the writing was not purely Hurrian, nor entirely Akkadian. It was a hybrid, containing linguistic patterns found nowhere else. The first partial translation spoke of the flame that breathes and the keepers who guarded light in the time before the flood. These phrases, while poetic, hinted at something older, perhaps a preserved memory of pre-Mesopotamian myths, an ancient cosmology carried through generations. The stele, they concluded, was no mere monument. It was a declaration of divine duty. The Mitanni flame keepers mentioned in fragmentary tablets from other sites were thought to be priestly custodians of sacred fire, protectors of a flame said to have been lit by the gods themselves. Fire, in the ancient Near East, was not only a tool but a living essence, a symbol of purity, transformation, and divine communication. The stebia's surface depicted ritual fires drawn as concentric spirals, merging into solar disks. Around these, faint images of figures kneeling, holding vessels aloft, seemed to portray a ceremony of renewal, the moment when mortal and divine light met. As excavations deepened, the team discovered a circular stone platform nearby, blackened, cracked, and surrounded by channels cut into the ground. These grooves, when reconstructed digitally, appeared designed to guide liquid, perhaps oil, toward the center, feeding the flame during ceremonies. This was not a random hearth, it was a sacred engine, engineered to sustain a perpetual fire. At its center, buried beneath centuries of ash, archaeologists found a small bronze dish containing traces of hardened resin and bitumen, materials known to burn slowly and brightly, used in ancient temples as eternal flames. The more researchers studied the stele, the more peculiar its physical qualities became. Under light, its black surface reflected faint iridescent hues, almost metallic. Spectroscopic analysis revealed traces of obsidian fused within the basalt, suggesting it had been exposed to extremely high heat, far beyond what normal ritual fires could produce. Some theorized the stele had once stood directly above an intense furnace or blast site, perhaps intentionally transformed by fire to symbolize divine indestructibility. Others speculated that the stele might have been struck by lightning, an event that vitrified its surface and gave rise to its flame-touched appearance. But among the most captivating findings were the patterns carved along its edges, flame-like motifs that, when mapped, corresponded to astronomical constellations visible in the Syrian night sky around 1500 BCE. In the stele's top section, the flamekeeper's torch aligned precisely with the position of Orion, the celestial hunter often associated with fire and rebirth in ancient cultures. Below, the spiraling lines mirrored the motion of Venus, the morning and evening star, long seen as the symbol of divine cycles. Whether coincidence or design, the alignment was too precise to ignore. The flamekeepers, it seemed, did not merely guard fire, they mirrored the heavens themselves. One fragment of the inscription, fully deciphered in 2021, sent waves through the archaeological community. It read, "When the stars fell, we gathered their fire. When the earth grew dark, we carried its breath." To some, this was metaphorical, describing the preservation of sacred knowledge through catastrophe. To others, it hinted at something literal, perhaps the worship of meteorites or celestial stones, objects that literally fell from the stars. Indeed, at the site's lowest strata, a small iron fragment was found fused into the soil. Meteorite-derived iron, the same material used by ancient Near Eastern cultures for divine artifacts. Could the flame keepers have tended a meteorite flame, a fragment of the heavens burning eternally on earth? Ancient texts from neighboring regions, like